Artie.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the November 7th, 2006 meeting of the Glendale City Council, being called to order at 5 after 6 p.m., meaning you have 55 minutes left to vote if you haven't voted. May we have a roll call?
It's at 8 o'clock.
Is it 8?
Hour and 55.
Oops, I
Giving
told
the
somebody
wrong
wrong.
information.
8 o'clock, folks. You can watch this council meeting and still get to the polls. May we have a roll call?
Council members Manukian.
Here.
Najarian.
Here.
Quintero.
Here.
Yusefian.
Here.
Mayor Weaver.
Here. The flag salute tonight will be led by Councilmember Yusefian and the invocation by City Clerk Artie Kasakian. Please
Please
stand.
stand. Follow after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Tonight, on Tuesday, November 7th, 2006, Election Day in Glendale and around our great nation, we pray for the dignity and the destiny of our democracy. We urge every citizen, member of both parties, Americans of all religions and of all colors from every section of this country to join us in this special prayer on the eve of Election Day and in anticipation of Veterans Day. As we cast our vote to determine our collective future, we give meaning and purpose to the words that our nation was founded upon, that all men and women were created equal and endowed with worthy of this responsibility, and pray that no American will shirk from their civic duty. Let us pray for the thousands of brave men and women of our armed forces, those veterans who have undersigned this nation's contract with destiny with their own blood and sacrifice, from the fields of Lexington and Concord to the beaches of Normandy and the banks of the Nangtong. Let us pray that our great nation, created of the people, by the people, and for the people, will not perish from this earth. Amen.
Thank you. Remember, you have till 8 o'clock to vote.
Very well said, Mr. City Clerk.
Unless you're watching this on replay.
If you're watching it on replay, don't go to the polls, they're closed. In fact, it was yesterday. Okay, may we have your report?
The agenda for the November 7, 2006 regular meeting of the Glendale City Council was posted on Thursday, November 2nd, 2006 on the bulletin board outside City Hall.
Next, please.
Next is presentations and appointments. At 3A is agenda preview for the meeting of November 14, 2006.
Thank you. Next, please.
How about the agenda preview?
Did you already read that in the record?
Yes.
Oh, sorry.
Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, for next week, November 14th, there are no housing agenda items. For the Glendale Redevelopment Agency, we have one item, Director of Development Services regarding the DPSS East Broadway. We will have a discussion of long-range plan, budget study session at 10 a.m. Also, another study session, which is in the afternoon at 2:30, discussion of short-term transit plan and analysis of the Beeline system. For the Glendale City Council meeting, under consent items, Director of Parks, Recreation, and Community Services, extension of the nutritional meals catering agreement. Director of Parks and Rec, installation of a security system at Pacific Park Community Center and Library. Director of Parks and Recreation, grant funding received from the County of Los Angeles Area Agency on Aging. Director of Community Development and Housing, carryover appropriation for Committee for Clean and Beautiful Glendale and Glendale Youth Alliance for fiscal year 05-06, and excess revenue in fiscal years 06-07 budgets. Director of Community Development and Housing, acceptance of federal grant to assist the disabled with job-related services. Director of Community Development and Housing, recommendation and approval and formation of a 501c3 nonprofit corporation to support activities of the Committee for Clean and Beautiful Glendale. Director of Public Works, approval of transfer of miscellaneous transfer drain at 1747 to Los Angeles County Flood Control District for maintenance. Director of Public Works, approval of the final map tract for a 4-unit new condominium subdivision at 1311 East California Avenue. Under adoption of ordinances, ordinance adding a provision to the GMC 1995 regarding authority of the city manager to execute indemnity agreements for certain city contracts. Director of Public Works, Shoal Canyon Landfill Expansion Environmental Impact Study. And hearings, Director of Planning regarding the Historic Resources and Mills Act contract for the property located at 1035 Hillcroft Road. That concludes my report, Mr.
That's all? Be a good week. Okay, what's next, please?
At 3B is recognition of Officer Teal Metz by the Crescenta Valley Chamber of Commerce.
And who's coming forth on that? Right ahead.
Hi, good evening.
Just your name for the record.
Hello, my name is Ira Hart. I'd like to thank the council for having me here this evening. It's my great honor to be able to present the annual award that we present to an officer in the community that exemplifies the highest standards of policing as well as community service. And this year's honoree is Officer Teal Metz. Thank you, Officer Metz. I'd like to present this award to you. I'd like the council to observe it. We will be having a formal presentation at our annual awards banquet, which will be held on December 7th at the La Cañada Country Club, and we'd be more than happy to have all of you join us if you have it in your schedule and are able to. And at that time, we'll have a more formal ceremony for Officer Metz. So once again, thank you for your service.
Thank you very much, sir.
Your moment in this, moment on video.
Oh, I didn't have a speech prepared, so I apologize. I'll try and wing it as best I can. I had a great time last year. I did a couple things of note. One in particular that kind of struck home. I did my own personal goal against DUI drivers in the city. I did that specifically for a friend of mine who used to work for Monterey Tow. David Garcia was one of our tow truck drivers who lost both of his legs in 2003 due to a DUI driver. So pretty much my goal against DUIs this 2005 was my personal tribute to him. So and amongst other things I did with the department, I was just happy to be a part of. Obviously, I'm happy to be a part of the great team and still working here for the city.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations.
Thank you. What's next, please?
At 3C is selection of a nominating panel for the Planning Commission to reappoint or replace Mr. Jordan Torgerson, Councilmember Chair Najarian, Mayor Weaver.
Okay, we'll get right on that.
Okay. Next, please.
3D is selection of a nominating panel for the Board of Zoning Appeals to reappoint or replace Mr. Sam Manoukian, Councilmember Chair Quintero, Councilmember Yusefian.
Thank you. Next.
Selection of a nominating panel for Parks and Recreation and Community Services Commission to replace Mr. Tony Tartaglia. Nominating panel is Mayor Chair Weaver, Councilmember Manoukian.
Yeah, and he didn't like that either. He wanted to be on the Board of Trustees and on the Parks and Rec Commission. Told him the rules are the rules. Mr. Yusefian?
On that item, Mr. City Clerk, does the Parks and Rec currently have a quorum?
I'll have to check and get back to you on that.
Because my understanding was that there is no quorum.
They don't, can he stay on until replacement? No?
Not unless you change by ordinance. The rules you adopted
I
2 years
think two
ago.
have, am I correct, two have resigned?
Yeah, I think without him, they may not have a quorum.
Yeah.
But I'm not
Last
positive.
week there was no
City clerk
meeting.
would have to
I
check.
tuned in, there was no meeting.
And I
get
think
that.
We'll
We can
check
get
the
that
roster and the
information.
panels and see if we can't encourage the two council members who are on that to move things along.
Sounds good. Okay, what is next, please?
City Council or staff comments?
Any comments? Mr. Yusefian and Mr. Najarian?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. As part of my packet last week, I did get a letter from, this is Alex Theater Regional Board's agenda. And as I read through the agenda and the minutes, the item that came to my mind was the sound system. And this is what it says, that the board basically sent out an RFP, had been issued, and that the bids would be opened on Wednesday. Macomb told the board that they did not expect any bids to be submitted because the potential vendors had found the city's bond requirement and prevailing wage requirements too difficult to meet. So, and this kind of brought me back to what, as we were remodeling our offices, there was a change order request, and the contractor was asking for an exorbitant amount for just 200 square foot of hardwood floors. He was asking something at the tune of $38,000. That is just exorbitant amount, and part of the reasons, as I said to our city attorneys in the past, some of our requirements have gotten so tough to meet, so we have narrowed and limited the number of contractors and subcontractors who we can choose from. And so what I wanted to do is ask the city manager to put this item on the agenda so we could discuss this and to see if there's a way, we can find a way to do something and what its ramifications will be, because it's costing us a fortune to do some of these jobs.
There's another factor in this. I think we had the low bid. We awarded the low bid. If there's a differential between the low bid and the next bidder up,
Right.
there's change order, he's going to make back what he left on the table.
Oh.
It's very customary.
But this one, we got no bids.
Yeah,
Okay, we'll
that's
put that on the agenda.
different. Okay, what is next, please? Oh, wait, you had something, Mr.
I
Najarian.
just want to announce again that the Tigers of Occidental College are extending their win streak, the longest in the nation, at 25 regular season games. Now that SC's been knocked off and Texas, Occidental Tigers
Who was
are leading the way.
USC.
When do they play Ohio, do you think?
We'll give you an update.
Yeah, I was going to say, you want me to set up a match with SC? That's
Thank
a
you.
lot of levity there.
Keep you posted.
Starbird
They
and
do
I-
play in the college league. I keep asking that. I'm not talking high school, right?
Mr. Starbird?
If Rutgers can get there, so can Occidental.
That's right, Thursday night.
That's right. Mr. Mayor, I'd like to quickly read an email memo I sent to you earlier today. Attached to the memo I received this morning from Elaine Wilkerson announcing her resignation and retirement effective December 4 of this year. As I've mentioned to some of you individually, Elaine has in many ways played the role of transitional manager for the planning department, taking Glendale to new levels of sophistication in how it addresses its long-range planning and bringing forward for discussion difficult but important planning issues. She has also built a strong professional planning department through the development of staff and the attraction and retention of competent, skilled, and highly professional individuals. Elaine has also been a valuable member of the management team, always contributing energy and vitality to any issue or discussion. In a relatively short time, Elaine has made contributions to Glendale that will benefit the community for many years, and I mean that sincerely. You know she has been contemplating this move for some time, but just today announced the date, and that date's going to come way too quickly, but hopefully this evening we'll see some of the fruits of her and her staff's labors and the kinds of improvements in Glendale that will last for many years. I want to thank her for that and announce to you Elaine's announced retirement effective December 4.
What's going on? Your secretary retires, you leave?
I'm afraid these things come in threes, too.
Yeah. Mr. Menuchyan.
Yes, I would like to take this opportunity, actually, to thank Ms. Wilkerson for her service. Over the number of years that I've worked with her, it's been always positive. I've had my strong disagreements with her, and one of those disagreements is coming to the council tonight, but I've also had very strong agreements with her as well. It's been a pleasure knowing you. I know you will stay around in the community. I appreciate the work that you've done. I know it was difficult following what the planning department went through, and I know that you went through a difficult time in terms of recruiting and getting good planners to come on board with the city of Glendale, and you've done an excellent job in that. I do appreciate the work that you've done and wish you all the best, and thank you for the work.
And what will be your last day here, sitting up here?
I
December
have 4 council meetings, including this, but not that I'm counting. So the last one would be November
28th.
28th.
Okay.
Thank you.
Take note.
Thank you all.
Take her to task that day. Okay. What is next, please?
Next is consent items, including minutes. The following are routine and may be acted upon by one motion. Any member of council or the audience requesting separate consideration may do so by making such request before a motion is proposed.
Mr. Menuchyan?
I'd like to pull 5C.
See, is there a motion on A and B?
And I move consent calendar on 5A and B.
Second.
Roll call.
Council members Menuchyan?
Yes.
Najarian?
Yes.
Quintero?
Yes.
Yusefian?
Aye.
Mayor Weaver.
Aye. Please read 5C into the record.
5C is Director of Glendale Water and Power regarding demolition and hauling of various structures, spec number 3156. Motion authorizing city manager to enter into a contract with Viking Equipment Corporation in an amount of $71,700 plus 20% contingency.
Mr. Menuchyan?
Yes, the city's engineer, the GW engineer's estimate is $278,300, and the bid came in at $71,700. I wanted to know why is there such a big discrepancy in that bid, and second, why are we allocating 20% contingency where we usually allocate 10%?
Because the number was too low, that's why.
I know, but I think we should stay consistent. If the bidder is underbidding, we should make it clear that we're not going to deviate from our practices of allocating 10% for a contingency.
And let me answer both your questions, because I asked exactly the same ones.
That'd
The
be a
difference
good
between the
rationale.
engineer's estimate and the bid amount are so much, one had to ask, where was it off? The staff still feels that their estimate, frankly, was reflective of the marketplace. This contractor is one who's done work for us before, a very large firm. There's a view that there were probably some benefits to them to keep work in this area, and as a result, they bid significantly under the engineer's estimate. The 20% is probably related to the nature of the work, demolition and some foundation work where they may run into things that they just weren't able to anticipate. But that, I think, is the answers to your questions. Kevin Todd with GWP is here, I think, can answer any questions you might have. Kevin, anything else to add to that?
Are they doing other work for us?
No, I think
They have
that,
done work for us in the past. They're a very good
Are
firm.
they doing any work for us now?
they've completed some work for us very recently. But yes, the project is a compilation of about 10 different items down at the Utility Operations Center here. And none of these items aren't anything that's new to us. We've demolished structures in the past, in the very recent past, and these estimates are reflective of those projects that we have completed recently. I can give you examples of certain items, but this company, I've gone down and talked with them on 2 different occasions now to validate their bid, and we've gone through it inch by inch, and they have a mutual understanding of the scope of work. And,
I just want to clarify that. We don't want people underbidding and allocating
Right.
a larger percentage for contingency.
Right.
And then, we could run into problems in terms of awarding bids and stuff.
This contingency isn't necessarily set up to compensate for any lack of their estimating the scope of work. What we're doing is tearing out foundations where our Unit 6 and 7 used to sit. There's a lot of underground piping there.
Okay.
There was a lot of fuel oil and stuff.
As
that could
long as
potentially-
that's clear.
Now, the view was there could be a lot of in the field sorts of situations we need to address that we just aren't able to anticipate.
Okay, that's fine. With that, I'll move 5C.
Second.
Yeah, I did that on a number of projects I had with the Corps. Based on the amount of unknowns, you jack up the contingency just to cover yourself.
Right.
Just setting money aside for your use, potential use. Thank you very much. Roll call.
Council members Menuchyan?
Yes.
Najarian?
Yes.
Quintero?
Yes.
Yusefian?
Aye.
Mayor Weaver.
Aye.
Next is oral communication. Discussion is limited to items not a part of this agenda. Each speaker is allowed 5 minutes. Council may question or respond to the speaker, but there will be no debate or decision. City manager may refer the matter to the appropriate department for investigation and report.
I'm taking a card out of order because the speaker is playing hooky from his polling location. Everybody on TV is watching this.
You mean that polling location is understaffed at the moment?
Apparently so. He's getting paid to be there, and he's here. You better not use the 5 minutes. Leon, you better get back there. Leon Mayor?
I'll do that. Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council and staff, my name is Leon Mayer, and I'm here on behalf of the Friends of the Glendale Public Library as chairman of the Author, Artisans, and Friends series. And we're having an event. Our next event is November 15th, Wednesday. That's a week from tomorrow at the Central Auditorium Library at 7 o'clock. And we will bring you John W. Dean. John W. Dean was the former legal counsel to Richard Nixon, President Nixon. He was also an Associate Deputy Attorney General in the U.S. Department of Justice, and he was also Minority House Counsel for the House Judicial Committee. And he will discuss his seventh book of nonfiction, Conservatives Without Conscience. Now, this is touted as a work of a Goldwater conservative who is disturbed by the present-day conservatism in this country. And the book stems from a joint inquiry that John Dean and the late Senator Barry Goldwater from Arizona made, which started about 10 years ago. So, November 15th, 06, come to the library, and regardless of what the election results are tonight, we promise you a very interesting evening, November 15th, 7 o'clock at the library. The parking is validated, admission is free, and we're looking forward to seeing you there, and thank you for hearing me out of order.
You're welcome. Back to the polls. We're now
If anybody wants any flyers in the audience, just raise your hand and I'll give it to you if I leave.
Mr. Dean has aged since the Nixon days. Doesn't quite look the same. Next speaker, Dr. Richard Espiritu, followed by Mike Nagel.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Council, and staff. I am Dr. Richard Espiritu. Mr. Kasakian, this is for you, and this is for Mr. Howard. Over a year ago, I raised the issue about audible pedestrian signals. Mr. Starbird was kind enough to inform us about the following. One, there was a disagreement between various blind organizations in that ADA did not address audible signals. And while he was at West Covina, there were some various problems. So therefore, tonight I'm going to present to you several documents, some of which belong to I've given to Mr. Kasakian to give to everybody. The first one was a study that was done by several individuals in Massachusetts in 1998. The presenter of the paper stated that ADA did address audible signals by virtue of the statement, access to public right-of-ways with people with disabilities. The installation of audible signals is an integral part of the Transportation Equity Act of the 21st century. Increasing attention of all populations and may contribute to the reduction of pedestrian vehicle conflicts in crashes. In the year 1999, the President passed an act called the Transportation Equity Act of the 21st century, which devoted to the audible signals provided for technical correction of the original law. It was in this job, it was interesting that the was entrusted to the American Association of State Highways and Transportation Office. The Department of Veterans Affairs did a study of 9 surveys in the state of California, one of which was West Covina. They asked 39 different blind organizations, finding that 32 of them were in favor of audible signals, and this was beneficial to the elderly. One of the other findings was people's attention. People between the ages of 1 and 7 there was 10 pedestrian accidents, 8 before audible signals and 2 after the installations. The Blind Veterans Association convention that was held in August of 2005 stated by resolution they would like the development of audible pedestrian signals. Last Thursday, the Glendale News Press had an article stating that the Glendale is the #1 most dangerous city in the state of California for traffic pedestrian collisions. That averages out to 1 every 4 days. The National Corporation of Highway Research Program, project number 362, these are the guidelines that are going to be presented by the federal government, will be available on November 30th, 2006. At this time, I would request the City Council, the City Clerk, to put on the agenda the possibility of putting in a ordinance for audible signals. Mr. Howard, I also provided you with an ordinance that was passed over a quarter of a century ago by the City of San Diego regarding audible signals. It's all in your packet. I wanted to make sure that I didn't catch you. I don't know how long Mr. Konsakian will be able to take this and make everybody have this available for everybody, but I hope that every individual on the City Council and every staff member has the opportunity to read this report. It did take me a little bit of time in research to put all this together, and you can always go back, because I gave you the cover sheets, and you can go back and read the entire law of the Transportation Equity Act of the 21st century.
Mr. Starbird, then Mr. Najarian.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, inasmuch as Mr. Spiritu purports to quote what I said, let's make sure it's accurate. I didn't reference the ADA standards because, frankly, I don't know whether audible signals are or are not provided for under ADA standards. What I attempted to reflect, however, was my experience in West Covina, where there were 2 different associations representing the blind who, frankly, were in dispute over the role of audible traffic signals in that community. Not to say whether they are or not accepted. I was only reflecting my experience. And, in fact, West Covina at that time and to this day continues to have audible traffic signals.
Mr. Najarian.
Mr. Mayor, the rate of auto versus pedestrian accidents is truly disturbing. I think it was highlighted by the news press, and I think you yourself participated in one of the stings that weekend. Unfortunately, the enforcement actions, unfortunately, I think the next day there was a fatality. So I know the police have been working on this. Mr. Starbird, I was wondering if we could have them come back and give us a report on what they view as the problems, and perhaps give some public comments as to how we can all do better, aside from the obvious ways of yielding to a pedestrian, but also some input for the pedestrians as to actions that they can take as well to curb some of this terrible rate of accidents that we've been currently leading the state in.
Mr. Mayor, Mr. Najarian, will certainly do that. The recent fatality is another tremendous disappointment in this community that seems to have more than its share, especially considering the tremendous efforts that you've asked us to undertake, and the police department and our public information office undertaken in the last several years to try and promote public education, public awareness, and frankly stepped up enforcement. We've become renowned for our pedestrian and driver pedestrian stings, and yet we still find these kinds of incidents. So we'll be sure and do that. We'll put it on a future agenda.
Mr. Najarian, you're right. I was down there. I did a TV spot for Channel 2 and Channel 9 on it, on pedestrian safety, and within an hour, I'm driving westbound on Wilson, a teenager comes out mid-block, crossing across in front of me with his headphones on, listening to his iPod, I guess, with his head down. I got close to him and stopped, and he turned, finally saw me, and jumped. Teenager, headphones on. What are you going to do? You know, I get tired. All of you see in this town people walking illegally. Signs say, don't walk, they walk. They walk mid-block. They don't care. They say, we have the right-of-way, but they don't understand the car's going to kill them even if they're right. So I don't know what it takes to educate people to at least look and see if there's cars coming before you walk. A lot of people don't seem to do that, and I don't know what you can do about it, except continue to try to educate. Next speaker, Mike Nagel, followed by Bonnie Adams.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, city staff, and citizens of Glendale. My name is Mike Nagel. I'm speaking in a small way to amplify what Dr. Richard Espiritu said. I want to also encourage the city council to attempt to install audible crossing indicators at the crosswalks we have that have walk and don't walk signs. One concern I have, this is sort of preemptive, I've heard some really exorbitant fees for installing these devices on our things in the range of $50,000 to $70,000 per unit, and I hope that if when you come to the point where you're deciding on contracts that you reject anything that high. It would be the work of 5 minutes to take a laptop computer to do the and set it up to do the job inside that box. A laptop computer is a full-powered computer, far more machine than is necessary to do the job, and it runs about $2,000. So I just want to ask you to think about that when you do get the bids that you're inevitably going to get. Thank you.
One thing, Mr. Stubbard, I was curious about, Mr. Yusefian, I know sees that at the airport. There's signs, instead of walk, don't walk, says
countdown.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Because you can go to a lot of our intersections, they're wide. It says don't walk, and they walk out, and you're forced to sit there and watch them come across illegally. I don't know what the cost is of those things, but maybe it'd be worth a trial at an intersection or two, putting those in and see if people look at the countdown and, Mr. Zern?
Mr. Mayor, we've actually been looking into this, and we've got, I think as Mr. Starbird alluded to way back when, there are a number of different sounds that you can get, and that sometimes causes issues about what sounds you use and whether sound versus countdown. But we've looked at them all, and we are looking at a couple of locations that we might try them on a test pilot basis. They don't cost $50,000, yet they're not as simple as buying a laptop computer. As you know, our signal system is very sophisticated, tied in, interconnected, and run by a system of independent computers. But it's something that we can certainly try, and our folks have looked into it, talked to other agencies. Mr. Starbird was exactly right. We've gotten different opinions from different cities about the reaction they've gotten from some of the disabled community in relation to those kind of devices. So I think we can easily find a couple of places to put in both the countdown and the audible, whether it's the chirp or the cuckoo or the bell or what it might be, and see if we can't gauge the effectiveness of those.
Did you have a comment, Mr. Zern?
Yes, that's, Mr. Mayor, that's what I was going to say. You pretty much covered it. I think the countdowns is a good idea, especially on like places like Brandon Central, long distances. You don't know how much you got left, basically, to go, and you get started and somewhere down the middle it changes. And you know, I've heard all this chirping and this and that for many years from other places. My question was going to be from you is what is the cost of just making that chirping noise?
Mr. Yusefian, I don't know what the exact cost is, but I know it's not $50,000 an intersection.
Okay.
It's something you tie into the PED signal button, and you know we've upgraded most of those to the bigger button. It also makes a noise to let you know that you've touched it and hit the right button.
Right.
But, We'll bring that all back to you as an example of different options we have with locations that we're recommending we try.
At the end of the day, you could do everything under the sun, and if somebody's not paying attention, they'll run you down.
Oh, and bring back the red light cameras, too.
Oh, yeah. When is that coming back?
He is installing more and more.
Yeah. Everybody under the sun is installing them except us. Just
Mayor,
talk about it.
Mr. Mayor and Councilmember Yusefian, we have an RFP out right now.
Oh, we do?
Yes.
Good.
Here we go.
There's an RFP out. The
Hallelujah.
Police Department and Public Works have cooperated on
Boy.
that. We'll be coming back to you with the results of that RFP and a recommendation.
Money and fines is going to start rolling in.
For a pilot
Hallelujah.
program.
Okay, Bonnie Adams, followed by Margaret Hamlin.
There are, I don't have any experience. Oh, I'm Bonnie Adams, sorry. I don't have any experience with the countdown things. I don't know what they are. But I know when I was in school 100 years ago that there were audible signals where I went to school, and it was just nothing but a little bell. I mean, it was a bell. Now, how much would something like that? I think putting in the audible signals is going to be one of the cheapest things that you have to do, that you should do anyway, because I'm afraid to cross these streets by myself. Now, I usually use a guide dog, which I don't have one right now, but I'm still afraid to cross these streets. These drivers are crazy. Now, on to something else. This week and next week are the last meetings. You'll see me here for a while. I'll be in the hospital after that, and I'll be. I don't know how long I'll be laid up, but as everybody breathes a sigh of relief, probably. But I hope to keep up with everything that's going on. I also want to bring up the fact, I want to make a couple comments about the ordinance that was passed a couple of weeks ago, or was it last week? A week before, for the GWP. First of all, Mr. Najarian, whining doesn't become you. I mean, you, as I was going out the door and you were making your comment about, well, we gave you what you want, and that's true, you did. I mean, I asked for a specific thing, and now you're asking for more. Well, you know what, guys? I didn't write the report. You guys somebody wrote the report. I didn't write the report. You gave 4 options. You opened the door for us to ask for more. And personally, I think that that you need to do more. I don't know when all of this is going to take effect, but I hope it's soon, because we really need it. Those people that I have fought for all year, and these people that are, I personally went for option 4. Now, I would have gone for 2 at first, because I think that's necessary. If you can get the city to collect all those taxes, you can get the companies to exempt the disabled and the low income whoever from paying these taxes. I've dealt with many companies that have said, if you ask the city and they say it's okay, no problem with us, you can do it. And I've done this many times. So as time goes on, I'm still going to fight for the other options to amend this ordinance, because this is a very important ordinance to us. So I just want to mention the fact that we didn't write the report. You did, not us. So you guys left the door open, and that's perfectly fine with me. But I just want to set the record straight that, yes, you're right, Mr. Najarian, you did give us what I wanted. That was true. But you opened the door to more, so now we're going to walk in, and that's it. Thank you.
Bonnie, I didn't think I was whining. However,
And don't
if your
let your sister
definition,
get mad at me.
Yeah, I'm not mad. If your definition of whining is perhaps detecting a sense of frustration in my remarks at giving almost everything that a resident who came before us asked for, and then have that resident express some displeasure that we didn't give them more than they asked for, then I'm probably guilty as charged, if that's your definition of whining. But I do wish you a speedy recovery, and our thoughts and prayers will be with you, and you can always catch our reruns if you missed the meeting.
Well, I just didn't, I wouldn't have said anything had you not had those other options, but since you did, that was the only thing I was saying.
Thank you very much. Mr. Manoukian.
Mr. Mayor, I would also like to join my colleague, Mr. Najarian, in wishing you well and a quick recovery.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Next speaker, Margaret Hammond, followed by Barry Allen.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, and city staff. My name is Margaret Hammond, and I do have to say, we have to admire somebody like Bonnie. You know, people sit out there and gripe, or they phone me, or whatever. They don't come here and speak up. I mean, and this lady is handicapped, has many health problems. So any of you out there that say, oh, I can't go because of this or because of that, think of Bonnie. And that's all I have to say. There was an article, my favorite subject, banquet halls, and, of course, the barbecuing. The article in the LA, California, on the weekend stated that that it was a racial subject regarding the outlying, as they call themselves, outwitting outlaws. Baloney malarkey. They knew the law existed, and because the authorities did not enforce the law, they got away with it for years, making tens of thousands of dollars illegally, and thought it was their right to continue doing so. Now, when the law has finally been enforced, they start screaming racism. If a drunk driver is arrested and then starts claiming it was racist because of his ethnic origin, and therefore he demands that the drunk driving laws be changed because he had got away with driving drunk for years, and so now it was his right to do so. Well, and then when he gets nailed, he starts screaming ethnic and racist. The law is on the books and should be enforced and not allow special favoritism because of racial whatever discussions that go on. It has never been that. It's that the law was on the books and should be enforced. That's the whole thing that I've spoke about. And that people, the rest of us in Glendale, that do not like the smoke, that do not like all the byproducts of this outdoor barbecuing, are entitled to our opinion and to be treated as residents, not just as they say in the article. 3 of the 5 members of the city council are Armenian, that were voted in by the Armenian community, and felt that they should be allowed to do the outdoor grilling because some Armenians consider this ban, which has always been on the books. It's not a ban. It's a law that was there to protect the rights of the citizens of Glendale. Okay? There it is. And suddenly they want to change it because they want to do business their way and they don't want to obey the laws. So what does it take to enforce the law? That's that. There are 40 banquet halls, and they keep on operating, many of them without adequate parking, fire requirements, and other bending of the rules, including this outdoor grilling. Hello, I think it's time that the rest of the people of Glendale be fairly treated. If the 3 Armenian councilmen cannot think of themselves as taking in all of the rest of the people of Glendale, then I think that's not very fair. You were elected, yes, but it's not really fair if you just think that you only have to cater to a certain segment of the citizens of Glendale. You're voted in to represent all the citizens of Glendale, be they Filipino Americans, be they Korean Americans, be they Irish Americans, be whatever they are. You're supposed to represent us all and not show favoritism and not make other people feel that they're wrong to stand up for their rights and be told that they have no right to be speaking out. It's a First Amendment law, and as an American, I am going to continue to use that First Amendment rule. And I feel that anybody else that wants to should do the same thing. And if you don't, it's too bad for you. It's just like voting. If you don't have enough sense to get out and vote for who you want to be running the state and running the city, then God help you. Don't complain. Don't complain. And if you do feel that you're wrongly treated, then get here or go or do whatever is necessary to speak up for your rights. And that's what I'm doing. And for many other people that call me over and over and say, thank God there are people, not just me, Herb, many others. I have other things I should be doing, taking care of my family, taking care of my property and my own business. But I come here, I take time to come here. I make sure that I read what's going on, and that I want to be kept up on what's going on in the city. Thank you very much.
Next speaker, Barry Allen, followed by Herbert Milano.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council, staff, and of course the public. I'm Barry Allen with Vanguard. I enjoyed hearing from Margaret Hammond. I enjoy hearing her comments and the fact that so many people do communicate with her, even though she doesn't have an email account. And she's not even connected to the wide world of the Internet. But people do call her and see her in all of the groups that she's a part of. And they call me and they email me. In fact, I just got caught up in all of the calls, and last week I just couldn't make it. So I apologize to you. And I know you certainly said, oh, we got a break. It was a really, really long meeting, and we've got a break. But actually, I watched some of it. And the more I watch it, the more the public is being deprived of a split screen, of being able to watch the expressions on the faces of the council members, being able to watch what they're doing, see their attentiveness, in some cases watching the steam come from behind their collars as people speak or as they look at the deliberations that they may have. And occasionally, Frank, a smile. That's always good. Always looks good on the camera. But, you know, we are looking at some times that we're sort of tremulous, that we're looking at some new costs that the city is going to have to bear, and your comment earlier about a bid on a contract being about $200,000 less than it was anticipated, and looking at the change orders. And I understand from reading a document that the MSB building has been retrofitted already, and that Brand Boulevard has been repaired and all completed. But, you know, you kind of wonder about some of these things as you drive around. You see that it's not completed, or the building hasn't been retrofitted. But that's okay. The city's going to get an award for a retrofitted building and all of the other things that Public Works has done that certainly you've all voted on. And when you read the 5-inch document that probably cost us about $100,000, you might have said, gee, this was an expensive document to get an award. More than that, okay, maybe $250,000, but who knows what it is, because so far the city, under Records Act request, hasn't been able to pinpoint the cost of putting that document together, those 5 inches of you know, sometimes unmitigated information. In fact, one of the things I was doing last Tuesday was I was getting my BS detector fixed. It was, you know, kind of slipping and missing some of it. But the fact is that the public is interested. No, they can't be here, not everybody, but they are interested in what's going on in this city. And they read Vanguard. We have about 5,000 people that are getting Vanguard. We're increasing that number each week because people want to see what's going on. Now, we hear one of our esteemed councilmen always speaking about penny pinching and whatever, but when he goes on a city trip, he rents the most expensive vehicles. I can't understand. There was like $400 for a vehicle rental, and I just rented a car for a week, $78, and didn't include the airfare though. But $78 to rent a car. And I don't know if the city has certain standards on reimbursement for vehicle leasing and hotel stays, but it seems to be extremely expensive. I'm staying at a reasonably expensive hotel in near Pittsburgh, and it's like $89 a day plus bed tax and things like that. And I think that we all need to look at how we can save the city a $1 here or $2 there, because we do have to pay our employees more. And that money has to come from someplace. And maybe it'll come off of expense accounts and reimbursements. And I think that that's what makes accountability. But, and I've also been asked to make sure that I can get this where people can read the number. That's the phone number to call, for Vanguard to get your copy of Vanguard each week. The City Council does. I don't know how many of the council members actually read it, but I would suggest that you do, because there is so much in the Vanguard that talks about what the council does. I'm Barry Allen for Vanguard for accountability. Thank you.
Herbert Milano.
Good evening. My name is Herbert Milano, members of the City Council, city staff. I arrived a little bit late today. Recently, I have been stuck in traffic. Heavy traffic coming all the way, 60 miles, takes me about an hour. The two freeways stuck. Wilson, from here all the way to Verdugo, is bumper to bumper. That's what I experience on a daily basis, and that's what I figure that many people who don't live in this area are unaware of. But we live it, and that's why it's of concern to me every single day. But anyway, I was coming over to City Council, listening to the radio, listening to the returns. And my daughter calls me on the cell phone, says, "Hey, Dad, did you vote this morning?" And I said, "Sure, honey. After I dropped you off in school, I went back and decided to vote." I like that personal experience of actually walking in there and saying hello to all the poll workers and all. And I said, "Well, what are the results?" And I said, "Honey, there's something truly amazing. Throughout the whole country, everybody's talking about political corruption. Throw the bombs out. Corruption is beginning to finally, be recognized as the major problem in the United States. And I think it's a major problem here in the city of Glendale, in the state of California, and throughout the whole country. Somehow, we, the voters, have very little say-so at the end of the day. We're the individuals who go out there and vote, but so many of us basically got the little slip of paper that comes in from your campaign contributor, and so many of them just simply know a particular slogan. Well, it's a good thing, because people are really beginning to listen carefully as to what these politicians are saying. Well, this past weekend I was at Monroe's. On Sunday mornings it's a great place to be. I encourage everyone to go out there to the farmers market. And I spoke to about 20 people. And I couldn't find one single individual who said that they were happy about the increased density in this area. Not one. The main issues to be is, the parking and the issues that I bring up, the lack of open space, and the fact that you guys don't appear to care. I talked to a lady called Sharon Spalding. Mr. Bob Yusefian, this lady supported you, and her husband, who, may he rest in peace, also supported you tremendously. And she asked me, "What do you think about Mr. Yusefian?" And I said, "Well, he's the one person in City Council who truly reads all his material, comes in prepared, knowing everything." But I said, "I have a problem, because sometimes when he votes, I feel that he puts his finger, moistens it, and figures out where the wind is blowing, and say, campaign contributors this way. Okay, I'll vote in that direction." And that's what, and she says, "That's exactly how I feel." So you may learn as much as you can about the city, Mr. Yusefian, but unless you vote the right way for the people, I think you're losing them. And then I spoke to this other fantastic lady who said, in our family, her name is Mary, in our family, we go for the underdog. It has always been that way. And I said, "Well, then you must really be very much in tune with my concept of really having a nice, large, open urban park in South Glendale for the people who live in apartments, who don't have a place, to go out and really spend time with their grandchildren." And she says, "I've taught my kids and my children to make sure they look out for the underdog." In fact, she says, as much of my time that I spend and sacrifice for my kids is one of the things that I always wanted to instill in them. Now, this lady's a nurse. Like with most nurses, they are in the caring type business, and it is not unusual. Well, the name of this lady is Mary Najarian, Mr. Najarian's mom. And when I think back at your past year, and I look at the person who I should have voted for, should have been your mom. Now, this is a lady with true conviction, okay? That is the person who should have run. Because that is the kind of care that we need, somebody who's really going to pay attention to the underdog. But we are not paying attention to the underdog. We're paying attention to the fat cats, the guys who are waiting right now for their, for the next agenda item. Look out for the underdog, Mr. Najarian. Your mom says so, okay? Because the fat cats have the ruling right now. They are the ones who pay your contributions. $100,000 to get you elected. We, the residents, do not get our parks. We, the residents of this area, are stuck in traffic, and you guys are looking at your next election. And that's the way I feel, Mr. Quintero. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Have no more cards. What is next, please? Mr. Yusefian.
I make a motion that we put Mrs. Najarian on the ballot.
Never had a
And just kick
never had
Ara
a
out and have
we've
his
never
mother
had
come
a
in.
mother-son combination.
That wouldn't be right. One meeting, Ara will be here, next meeting, the mother.
Bet your mother's watching this right now.
Well, let me make a
Mr.
comment.
Duncan.
Mr. Milano, when this whole process started with the downtown strategic plan, as I would go out to the Montrose Market and I would take renderings of some of the buildings that are coming to fruition now up there, and I'd ask people, what do you think? This is what's going on in the downtown Glendale. And this is for years. This is over a year ago. They'd say, well, that's downtown. That's fine. Keep it down there. We don't care. And that's the response I was getting as I was going up there and talking about that. Now that everything is almost to the wire and to the end, I think people are realizing that whatever happens anywhere in Glendale affects all of Glendale, and that's what's been missing in the past. So I understand your comments, but the people that I've talked to up there over the past 2 years have not shown the same interest as you have just expressed today. So, thanks.
As far as my mother goes, the lady is a
I've
saint.
never talked to her.
Is our communications over yet?
The lady is a saint.
Lady is a saint.
Can we move on? Okay, what's next, please?
7 is adoption of ordinances. 7A is resolution adopting findings of environmental impact,
City Council
statement
sounds
of
good.
overriding considerations and mitigation monitoring program for the Downtown Specific Plan, DSP. 7A1 is resolution for DSP, staff's proposal. 7A2 is resolution for mid-rise alternatives to DSP, and 7A3 is resolution for low-rise alternative to the DSP.
Mr. Howard, do you recommend we read all of these in right now or take them individually?
It depends. If you want to discuss, I assume you're going to want to discuss them all. It might be
I
a good
have
idea just to
cards.
read them all into the record, and then you can go forward and handle them.
Yes, please start reading.
All of them?
Is there any way you can shorten up the urgency ordinance?
Before we get into this,
You want to?
appropriate time to discuss my little issue.
I think
Anytime
it's
is
a
an
very
appropriate
large issue.
Anytime's an appropriate time because we've made a determination.
Okay.
I would, before we start discussing this item, as always, as my mom taught me, it's always best to do the right thing, and sometimes better late than never. As we went through the map delineating the area, designating the downtown strategic plan, specific plan, it came to my attention that I'm a part owner in a multi-family dwelling building, which is
So you have a conflict?
within 300 feet of the zone of the downtown specific plan. However, the part of the zone that it is contiguous to is, in fact, this City Hall complex, the Perkins Building, the MSB Building, and the City Hall complex. There are no changes at all in the plan that would affect anything in this Civic Center complex. Therefore, after a discussion and a presentation of the issues to our city attorney, the city attorney indicated that there is no actual conflict for myself. Is that correct, Mr. Howard?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Najarian, if you'd like me to elaborate on that a little bit, I could.
Why don't you please elaborate? We're here for openness and, what's that other thing? Accountability.
Transparency.
Transparency. So please elaborate on my...
The provisions under Fair Political Practices Guidelines provide that if one owns real property, and I'll get into some of the exceptions in a moment, within 500 feet of the boundaries of a governmental decision. The boundaries could be a specific plan, such as what we have here, or a particular piece of property that may be the subject of an individualized decision, that absent some of the exceptions, it's what they call presumed material financial effect, or it's presumed material that there would be a reasonably foreseeable financial effect on the public official's property. We went and did a radius map of your property and compared it to the zone of the boundary of the specific plan. I found that indeed within the boundary of the specific plan is 300 feet. However, the properties that are within that 500 feet are only the Civic Center. This property is separated by a fairly significant and large street, a commercial strip which will not be changed and is not within the specific plan area, and therefore there's an argument that even if, and I say even if, it's deemed material because you're within that 500 feet of the specific plan boundary, that there is just no it's not reasonably foreseeable that the decision will have any financial effect on that multifamily property that is approximately 750 to 850 feet away from any property that's going to be affected by this decision. That's number one. Number two, if the property is determined to be essentially indirect, have an indirect as opposed to a direct impact, or if the decision is going to have an indirect effect on the property, and the FPPC guidelines note that rezonings, general plan amendments, because they require other actions later on down the road, somebody has to make an application for a permit, somebody has to seek a development approval under a general plan, that in fact those will be considered indirect. It's presumed immaterial. So you don't even have to get into the analysis beyond material. But even if we analyze it as material, because we'll claim that the presumption applies, it's still based upon the specific facts and circumstances rebutted. And the FPPC regulations, and I can certainly cite the regulation if you'd like, actually calls out that presumption of materiality can be rebutted by specific facts noting that there is no reasonably foreseeable chance that the decision will have any financial effect on the property. And that's our analysis. And as I pointed out in the past, only the FPPC written advice based upon specific facts can shield someone from civil responsibility, but we take a pretty hard look at those guidelines and those regulations when we assess them.
Now, in addition to that property, that potential conflict, and I have stated this before, and some people who follow council may remember that I do have my law practice located in a office located at 500 North Central Avenue, which is clearly within the smack dab in the middle of the downtown specific plan zone. My interest in that office is just an office lease. It runs for another 16 months, and as in our previous analysis, there's no way that that would confer any sort of economic benefit to me or detriment to me, as a matter of fact, with any of the changes that we're potentially considering. Is that the correct analysis?
That's correct. We have actually analyzed that in the past relative to a project-specific request that came before the redevelopment agency, and we've analyzed it in that context. The rules are the same. The rules for leasehold interests and materiality are different than they are for property ownership interests, and as we indicated in the past, given the types of decisions that are made, it will not change or affect financially one way or the other, either increase or decrease your assets or expenses or anything of that nature. So the analysis is the same. There's no conflict in our view.
Thank you. And some may ask, well, Mr. Najarian, you abstained from voting on a zoning change on 701 Glen Oaks where you had obtained some income from the applicants within a 12-month period above the de minimis amount. And the distinction between that episode and what we have today is that is, as by definition, a true economic interest, and which raises itself to the level of a conflict.
Well, all of the interests, whether it's real property, source of income, gifts, etc., are true conflicts if the factual pattern meets the requirements of the law. And under the circumstances involving 703, I believe it's 703 East Glen Oaks, there was no exception. There's no real analysis about materiality other than, or rebut, for example, real property, you can rebut the materiality provision. The law is very clear. With regard to sources of income, it's if you receive it within 12 months, there's no rebutting, there's no peculiar circumstances or facts. Once you receive it, that 12-month period is immutable. You're going to have to wait till the end of that 12-month period. And as you might recall, there was also the rule of necessity that we indicated applied in that circumstance because of the requirement for a full unanimous 5-vote requirement due to the petition that was filed.
So in sum, Mr. Mayor, thank you for being so patient. I will be participating in the discussions and deliberations and votes concerning the downtown specific plan this evening.
Mr. Menuchyan.
Yes, just a clarification in terms of your findings, and I'm fine with the findings, but shouldn't the downtown rezoning area be taken as a whole as opposed to a piece of it, since we are dealing with the whole downtown specific plan and the rezoning of most of the downtown?
When you say taken as a whole,
as
I just want to make sure I understand clearly.
Adjacent, his property being adjacent to the whole rezoning area, not necessarily a specific building within the rezoning,
Yes.
and that's the question.
Yes.
And I don't have a problem with the participation. It's just a clarification issue for me, because that's the question I ask myself.
And it's an excellent question. As I indicated, if we interpret the guideline, it's 18704.2, to apply to the property which is within 500 feet of the boundaries of the specific plan, it could be argued that that meets the materiality standard. Right. But under the law, that materiality standard can specifically be rebutted by that. It becomes essentially presumed material. It can be rebutted by facts indicating that even though it may be material, there is not a reasonably foreseeable chance that the decision will have any financial effect. And so what we did is we looked at that and said, all right, if it is, let's say it is presumed material. Then you look at, well, what properties are actually going to be changed by the specific plan. The properties that are within that 500-foot bubble are the Civic Center campus.
Oh, that I understand.
And so with that, the nearest property that is going to be changed that could arguably increase in value, which then could have this skipping effect over to this multifamily property, is more than, based upon our math, is about 750 to 800 feet away. Plus the fact that you've got this major street as well as commercial. Even if it's deemed material, you still have to take this next step as part of this, what we call 7-step analysis, and that's, is it reasonably foreseeable it's going to have a financial effect? And our conclusion is the answer is no, based on that. So your point is, if we look at it in that fashion, it would be deemed material, but it's still as part of the analysis. I think it's just not reasonably foreseeable that it's going to be a financial effect based on the specific facts and circumstances of the location of this property in conjunction with the, or in connection with the specific plan boundaries.
Thank you.
Okay, would you read 7B, C, D in the record, not D? Does he have to read every one of those?
He could refer. He doesn't have to. Well, actually, this is an ordinance. He should, because we do
Okay.
read ordinances pursuant to charter by reference to its title, and this is the time.
Go ahead, City Clerk, start with B.
7B is resolution adopting general plan amendment 2006-05 with attached exhibits A to E. 7C is urgency ordinance amending South Brand Boulevard specific plan and zoning map to reflect new specific plan designations and zoning map designations related to general plan amendment number 2006-05 and zone change number 2006-07 in connection with the downtown specific plan. At 7D is urgency ordinance adopting the downtown specific plan, amending sections 30.10.010, 30.10.020, 30.12.010, 30.12.020, 30.12.030, 30.12.040, 30.14.010, 30.14.020, 30.14.030, 30.14.040, 30.14.050, 30.30.010, 30.30.020, 30.30.040, 30.31.020, 30.32.040, 30.32.050, 30.33.130, 30.33.140, 30.33.190, 30.33.200, 30.33.220, 30.34.010, 30.34.090, 30.34.100, 30.340.120, 30.44.020, renumbering sections 30.10.040 through 30.10.070 to 30.10.050 through 30.10.080, respectively, adding 30.10.040, 30.14.060, deleting Chapter 30.48 to Title 30 of the GMC 1995, and amending Chapter 10 of South Brand Boulevard specific plan relating to the downtown specific plan offered on October 31st, 2006 by Councilmember Yusefian at 7D1 downtown specific plan staff's proposal, at 7D2 downtown specific plan mid-rise alternative, and at 7D3 downtown specific plan low-rise alternative.
Mr. Howard, did he miss anything on D?
I'm good. For anyone watching at home,
No,
those
sir,
are
I
the
was
winning lottery
actually, I was
numbers.
actually tracking the title of the ordinance while you read it. He got it.
Very good. Okay, Mr. Howard, how do we want to proceed on this so that we're all, like, we've only been at this for at least 4 years. Where do we go? We had the meeting this afternoon, we did some clarifications, we have a few cards. I don't know how
Robert
much
may have some.
discussion
Well,
we need.
let me suggest we have staff run through the direction you
briefly.
gave us today and their responses to that. Hassan, does that make sense?
That would make perfect sense.
Just touch on,
Summarize the direction you gave us at noontime, what we heard, and how we've incorporated into that. Then you can ask any question you have, and I would recommend you
and
take
all of this
oral
now?
communications.
Yes.
Oh, you're going to explain this too.
I'm going to just explain what this covers.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, City Manager. Per your direction, we actually made some changes to the draft downtown specific plan and to the language of the ordinance to which the downtown specific plan draft is an attachment. I'll start, and on your packet, there are 4 items. The top 2 are, the first top version is the strike-through version of the language that we changed since this afternoon to the downtown specific plan. The second item is the language changes to the ordinance. The 2 thicker items at the bottom are actually the clean printout versions of both those documents after you apply these changes. I'll go very quickly through the changes in the downtown specific plan. On the top page, where you have this table with table 4-A, height and /FAR limits by district. At the bottom, under footnote number 1, you'll notice the underlined sentence that we have added. This was something that the council pointed out to us to make sure. It's in all cases, height limits shall include feet and stories. So we're clarifying the definition of height there. The next page, under guidelines for stoops, if you notice, under guidelines number B, we have changed the minimum 3 feet wide for stoops to minimum 4 feet. The next page, height and density bonuses. As directed by council, you'll see in the table 7-A, for sustainable design, LEED Gold or Platinum, we have added language to allow the same density bonus for Platinum as well as Gold. And underneath, we added language. Yes.
Mr. Yusefian?
I hate to do this to you, but this is something we didn't catch on. Maybe you can just give an explanation, and that would make, you are giving people 2 stories or 30 feet, or...
Mr. Yusefian, let's reference where this is.
It's on the same page, it's on 100.
On that same page.
Under the incentives, it says reuse of existing building. Somebody reuses an existing building, gets an increase in height by 2 stories. Considering the fact that historic preservation is getting the maximum allowed. So what is this reuse of existing building?
The reuse of existing building is it would apply to a building that may not be necessarily historic, but the Design Review Authority might consider the existing design or architecture significant enough that they might, for example, ask to incorporate the building or maintain the building. And in lieu of, for doing that, then the developer would be allowed to actually add a little bit height and density to other parts of the property if that building is part of a larger project. Or if it's not historic and the part of the building is being maintained, then they could be given they could be rewarded by giving them additional height and density for maintaining the significant architecture.
And the reason I asked that, because I did see the historic preservation issue, and we had a person who came and spoke on that, especially on density transfers and all that. So I wanted this clarification, because that's what I was checking with Mr. Starbird. In a scenario like that, when the maximum is 6 stories, you have a 3-story, you're going to the maximum of 6 for historic preservation, so you have a 3 left over. And then reusing an existing building, that's another 2, so that makes it 5. I mean, that's the part that I didn't know how you're going to massage that one. Or maybe you don't need to because you already have an explanation for that.
Well, actually, did the director want to say something?
I was just going to say that when you get to the maximum, you get to the maximum. You can't exceed the maximum.
You can't exceed the maximum.
But can you sell the other?
Well, right now, you can't, because we haven't got transfer of development rights. That's something we'll have to address when we report further on that. That's part of the implementation.
So may I suggest that we add one word to this then, reuse of existing buildings that are not historic? Because historic is already covered. This becomes reuse of buildings that are not historic.
Yeah,
so this way it doesn't become a bonus on top of bonus.
But this is readaptive use is what we're talking about here.
It's actually retrofitting existing buildings. Right. The only since this is a code, codes actually behave a little bit strangely, because if we say if they're not historic, then we would have to make a determination that they're not historic. However, this provision allows a person who may not wish to bring their building to be designated historic, but might actually be a building that may qualify for historic.
Actually, can we use Mr. Quintero's verbiage? Because that is a known phenomena throughout the planning.
Readaptive use.
Readaptive reuse.
No.
Adaptive reuse.
Adaptive reuse.
We could use that. Again, adaptive reuse is a technical word that's used for designated historic buildings throughout the state. If we do that, we're afraid we might cause confusion.
Mr. Starbird.
Isn't this likely going to be spelled out in the way it'll be applied in a development agreement?
That's actually correct.
Yeah, so it'll really be very case-by-case driven, fact-driven by whatever project you're working on.
All right.
Fine.
Say no more.
The next section, if you turn the page, that's under the implementation programs. Earlier today, the city attorney shared some language that, if you notice at the bottom of the page, under 9.3, we replaced the language for subsection D. If you turn the page, and there's a new language for subsection D, as the city attorney, the chief assistant city attorney today shared with you this afternoon. That's basically the same exact language that we transferred into the text of the Downtown Specific Plan draft. So that concludes the changes that we took from you this afternoon in the DSP. Now, if we go to the second set, which is this single page, you directed us to expand the language for the 10% variance of all required standards under the DSP for pipeline projects to allow, particularly one pipeline project that meets the maximum standard with incentives, but to expand the language to allow them to vary from the minimum to maximum by right standard without the incentives by within 10%. If you'll notice under section 33, subsections A and C, the language that we've put in italics actually specifies and makes some changes that we'll make for that particular provision. We have copies of this at the back for anybody who would like to see the same language in the back. If you'd like me to elaborate any further, I would. And the same.
I have a question.
Go ahead. Please.
Section 34, it says the planning director shall have the authority to make minor, non-substantive changes or clarifications to the downtown specific plan, including correcting typographical errors and graphics. The official copy of downtown specific plan shall be in color. I don't have a problem with a lot of them. I have some issue with the clarifications, because if there's going to be any clarifications made by anyone, I think we should get to see that, because whoever the planning director is, because she is leaving, if they may understand one thing, we understand something else, I think maybe that should be shared. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Define the term clarification.
The reason that we
Yeah.
actually put that language was that after tonight, if the downtown specific plan gets adopted, once we go to colorize the black and white pieces and then re-edit everything, we might come across typos, and we may come across with sentences that may be just a little bit loose. So this would only authorize us to administratively make those corrections without having to come back for a new vote. That's all it means.
Okay, so if it was meaningful, you'd be back, but if it's just grammatical or something, you'd be authorized to go ahead and do that.
Grammatical, I don't have a problem. Clarification is what I have problem.
Well, I think he's trying to explain the definition, which is, you can use a different word for it. Well, wait up, I got 4 people that want to speak. Let's start with the city attorney, then Mr. Starber, then Mr. Najarian, then Mr. Menuchyan.
The key words you need to probably focus on are the words, make sure I'm on, minor, non-substantive changes or clarifications. So the clarifications or changes can only be minor and non-substantive. Non-substantive essentially means they can't affect what council has really adopted. There may be slight grammatical changes. This is language that you'll typically find in contracts. You'll find it in HUD agreements. You'll find it in a lot of fairly significant agreements, where in development agreements, frankly, you'll find it as well. Town center development agreement has similar language, so you don't have to come back to the council where you find some minor error that clearly is within the intent of the council, but you need to make that change because administratively someone may say that doesn't make any sense, and so you change it. Certainly, though, if the majority of the council wants to change this or delete it, we can make those changes now. So we can bring it back, so that we will bring back changes if you'd like to make the clarification yourself.
That's a question of trust. So, trust that, Mr. Starber, then
But recognizing you've all spent a great deal of time on this, it wouldn't seem to me to be inappropriate and probably reasonable to at least report to you on all those various changes that are made. Not necessarily seeking direction, but then if some council member takes an issue with one of them, you could raise it, it could be placed on the agenda, we can
So if
address
you-
it. But
if
at least you'll be made aware
you
of all those.
discover a typo, then you'll tell us what the typo
Well, they're going to be
error
going
is.
through it, so at some point they'd compile all those things and let you know the various clarifications and corrections that they've made that fall into this category.
Mr. Mayor, we're hoping to have a color copy available by the end of the month.
It's
and
not the color we're worried about.
Well,
Right.
but when we do that, all the typographical checks will be done, so we'll be able to indicate to you if we had to make any
They can provide you with a
changes.
list of those.
Okay,
We'll be
Mr.
happy.
Najarian, then Mr. Menuchyan.
Okay, not to be technical with the grammar and syntax, but does substantive also act as an adjective to clarifications as well as changes? So it's substantive changes, substantive clarifications? Minor,
Or
non-substantive.
Minor, non-substantive, and both, the phrase minor applies to both non-substantive and given the location of the comma, or the lack of the comma after changes, it's minor, comma, non-substantive changes or clarifications. So all of them have to be minor.
Because I would share, were it not, if we were just to focus on clarifications, I would support Mr. Yusefian's concerns that clarification to you might be a world of difference to us.
Well,
But
and
as long
actually-
as it's minor, non-substantive clarifications, I'm okay with that.
Back when this language first came up, we had that discussion because we expressed some concerns that the council itself might have some concerns about allowing changes. So it really, we made sure that the language, that the comma was in a place so that minor clarified both non-substantive and clarifications.
Mr. Menuchyan.
I have a question on one of the exhibits, if I may.
Please go ahead.
On the General Plan Amendment number 2006-05, Exhibit A, which is the third page on 7B. I really can't tell what it is, but it says proposed zoning and general plan amendments, downtown specific plan and vicinity. And it has a dark the map, it has a dark area, a shaded area, and the shaded area says zoning change to C2, general plan design, whatever, and that shade is on the West Glen Oaks Boulevard.
That's correct.
We haven't discussed Glen Oaks Boulevard, I don't see it in any of the maps, however it's in this exhibit?
The zone change is actually, the zone change, we have brought it up, and it's part of the environmental impact report. That particular stretch on Glen Oaks is right now in the CBD. If the downtown-specific plan is adopted, the CBD zone would then be eliminated everywhere except for that part of Glen Oaks. That part of Glen Oaks, the C2 commercial zoning that would be applied to that would be consistent with the kind of development that has occurred along Glen Oaks. Nothing beyond that would be appropriate. And
Exactly what are we talking about in terms of
You're keeping it
C2?
to 6 stories.
Is it 6 stories again?
C2.
in the
What are we rezoning here?
You got 6 stories. C2.
C2, District 2 has a height limit of 4 stories or 65 feet, whichever is less applies to all districts. So that means that it can't be more than 4 stories or 65 feet. And if I'm not mistaken, there are office buildings there that are 3 and 4 stories.
And they'll have the.
It goes through where?
It goes from
It goes from Central
from
to-
Pacific to Central and then on to Brand. It's actually from Brand all the way to Pacific. It's the north side of Glen Oaks, which was in the redevelopment area, I understand, because years ago, Phil could help me with this, the intent was to encourage the redevelopment of that area.
Right.
But when we did the analysis of the whole downtown, we realized that it really was not the same height nor intensity of the rest of the downtown, and it's abutting residential areas, and we felt that
There's a number of multi-family housing over there as well.
just on the north
On
side,
the other side,
across
right.
Little Glen Oaks, I think it's called.
Mhm.
And so we felt that the type of development that was there should be permitted as of right, but it shouldn't be something that allowed taller buildings up against the multifamily.
If there's 3 to 4 story buildings there now, why do we need to rezone it to allow 4 stories?
Well, the CBD zone, which is presently there, has no height limit. And so we wanted to put it to some other zone, and rather than put it in the downtown specific plan, we felt it was more in keeping with the community commercial zone and the community commercial area around there. And it seemed to be more compatible with the multifamily just to the other side of the street.
Does that area get any bonuses at all?
No, it's not considered part of the downtown specific plan, strictly same as community commercial elsewhere. And they were all noticed, all the property owners were noticed
So
of these
that's
changes.
basically a basic down zone.
Yes. It's a down
Not
zone.
part of the downtown
Remember, we're
specific
down
plan.
zoning everything because there's no
I
height
understand
limit.
that, but this one has a specific plan. It has all kinds of stuff that, there's all kinds of incentives as far as design and open space and lead and so on and so forth. These guys, they go from unlimited height down to 4 stories with nothing.
Well, they have all the permissions of the C2 zone, which many uses are permitted, but the height limit is 4 stories. And we felt that was to in fact, ensure compatibility with the multifamily just to the north. And I think it's in keeping with the entire Glen Oaks stretch through there that is commercially zoned, it's either C1, C2, or C3 in all cases,
Also,
except for the multifamily
If I may
areas.
add, also some of the lots along that stretch are so limited in depth that larger development beyond the C2 really would not be possible, even if they were appropriate. Now, by rezoning those
You
to
mean larger development would not be
larger than what would be
possible?
allowed under C2.
Would not be possible?
Would not necessarily be possible.
No.
There would be some limitations because and maybe at
Well,
some point.
let me understand the comment that you just made.
Yes.
I have to make a correction. I misinformed you.
Okay.
I was looking at my code and it's
Under
wrong.
CBD, larger buildings are not possible, is that what you're saying?
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm actually saying the physical limitations of the lots really limit what can be built on the lots, without large assembly, because the stretch is so thin and long. But that is only secondary to our concern that although this area remains in the redevelopment area, we do not necessarily think, again, the driving the principle behind the entire rezoning area was height and density. Because of the location of that particular stretch, it would not be appropriate to allow higher heights and densities for that area.
And the height limit is 3 stories, 45 feet. I apologize, I read the wrong column. My eyes were not lined up correctly. And I can recall why we chose C2 over C3. If you remember when we did the East Broadway zone, C3 was the zone that was there, and I, at the time, remarked how incompatible the C3 zoning is with residential development because of the array of uses. It permits a lot of auto uses and uses that have large impacts on neighbors. In particular, the C3 zone permits, as of right, a full array of retail uses, but it also permits a number of other uses that have a lot of traffic. And so C2 is more a community zone. It's actually called the community commercial zone. And I apologize for reading the wrong column.
One more thing about that area is that there's no access off of Glen Oaks. In addition to the narrowness of the lot, there's no access off Glen Oaks. You have to come in behind these buildings. So that alone is going to limit.
In the back of the
Right.
buildings, that's correct. They are limited.
They're taking access off the same street that a lot of the multifamily is.
Some
And
of
the
them have
interaction.
access off Glen Oaks, like Kaiser and
I think Kaiser does, but I don't believe
the rest
some of the
don't.
office buildings, the other office buildings do. There's also the Verdugo Hills Country Club. There's
That doesn't
Robert
either.
Hall.
None of them do.
Robert Hall and Associates.
And come off Glen Oaks.
And they're all 3 stories, or
Right.
perhaps 4, but I think mostly 3.
Okay. Any other questions on that? I have some cards.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's go with the cards. We beat this to death pretty good. Don't mind, I'll try 2 minutes, and if you need more, we can go there. First speaker, Ray Patel, followed by Nancy Kent.
Good evening, council members. My name is Ray Patel. I am the owner of the Best Western Golden Key Hotel at 123 West Colorado Street. I just want to apologize. I couldn't be here earlier when my counsel was speaking to this council. I thought the matter that I'm going to speak of would have been resolved on October 31st. I got here a little bit before 6 o'clock, and I sat in this room, Mayor Weaver, and I looked at that symbol behind you, and it looked blurry to me. So I took a walk, and I saw that same symbol on the police station across the street, a building of enforcement of laws. And I saw a peacock in the middle. And where my grandfather is from, in India, the peacock is a symbol of purity, honesty, decency, and protection. And that's what I want to seek today. What is right? What is right is the Best Western Golden Key Hotel should have the same height as its neighbor, the new project, the Town Center, developed by Rick Caruso. For some odd reason, everybody seems adamant on the planning board to give it only 4 stories by right, and 2 additional stories if I build a hotel. But that land I own, and I cannot understand why it is not given the same height as its neighboring buildings that are being constructed. I was not here earlier today, but my counsel had told me there was some questions raised by Councilmember Yusafian in regards to if I was to build there, would I consider building a quality structure? Well, that's the reason why we have the design board here and the planning department, other agencies employed by the city to make sure I build a fine project that complements the town center or the neighboring buildings. Mr. Weaver, you had commented that you and I had several comments and conversations together. I just need 1 more minute. Thank you. In regards to joint ventures with the developer of the town center, as I recall, actually it was one conversation, 1-to-1. It lasted about 15 minutes, where you had mentioned that you had worked on the Hilton project, known as the Red Lion back then, and had worked out the air rights for that hotel, and that is something I should consider. And the only reason we had that conversation is the council meeting prior to that, you had mentioned that I should consider building something to complement the town center. And I had told you that that is something I can consider, but my concern was if I go up 10 floors or such, would my new neighbor have an issue with that? And you had mentioned that that is something you will check on. And you had also mentioned that I may consider going into some kind of JV, joint venture with Rick Russo. I had mentioned to you that he has made a promise to me, and I'm looking forward to him finishing that agreement first. But go ahead and look into it. I never heard from you, and several days later I called your office, and I had a chat with you. And your response to my inquiries from that conversation that day was that you had talked to the developer, and he had straight out said that it's best I just sell to him. That was our only conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Patel. I remember it differently than you. That's okay. I'm getting old.
Yeah, so am
I can't remember all. I can't remember all the meetings. I know I was down there and I talked to you more than once about different issues on your piece of property. Nancy Kent, you said thanks for encouraging LED. Did you want to say something more again?
Yes, my name's Nancy Kent, and I wanted to thank you for encouraging sustainable buildings in the downtown area, LEED certified buildings, and as Mr. Hagani read the changes, I did hear that the word platinum had been added, but I did not hear anything that mentioned certification. So I just wonder if that is, did I miss that? Okay. Thank you very much for doing that.
Welcome. Al Hoffman, followed by Herbert Milano.
Good evening, Mayor Weaver, council members, staff, Albert Hoffman, resident of Glendale. I was here last week, but I had to leave. I had to go trick-or-treating. But
your age?
Yeah, no. Actually, I had to take care of some dogs that were going crazy. The issue I have is I did sit through the thing about the Americana Park, and hearing that discussion, I realized that it really has become apparent that we really do need another park area for really public use in the downtown area. And I think the opportunity that presents itself south of the Alex Theater is one that should be seriously considered by the decision makers in this. I realize it's not really going to be deemed or spelled out in this DSP, which allows that to happen, but I'm hoping that the council will really take it serious and look into developing a park there. I believe the Americana Park, it just won't work out, being that it's so close to residences. And I can't see how you could have, like they were talking, frisbee throwing and things like that going on in Americana. There's going to be water features there, and that kind of stuff just won't work out there. And I think Mr. Milano suggested last week that we just turn the whole park over, and I'm sure Mr. Caruso will run a fine park. It'll be available for certain public things that would be good, events. But as a public park, I just don't see it happening. And I think we have an opportunity, and we really do need public park space downtown. It shouldn't be confused with open space, which we keep talking about. Park is a park. Open space, paseos and the like are great. That's neat for downtown, and we should have that. But we really do need a legitimate park area, and I believe that that should be pursued. Thank you.
Thank you. Herbert Milano.
Two minutes only?
If you need more.
Yes, I would like to have some more time, if I could, please.
Go right ahead.
Good evening, members of the City Council, City staff. I just called my daughter to let me know, to see if Proposition 90 is about to pass. It appears that every element out there with regard to the pundits and the experts, this thing is not going to pass. So the whole idea of this urgency to basically move today, I don't think is really validated by the projections. Nonetheless, if I may direct you to Section 5.1, the Parks and Open Space section of this particular document, please, it's really important that you take a look at it.
Which document is it?
Your downtown-specific plan. It's
The
they will
plan
send
or
it
the
to you.
EIR?
Not the plan. It's the plan, not the EIR. It's section 5.1, right? That same
Page
page, right there.
71 of the Downtown Specific Plan.
Yeah, you see a picture of, oh, next page, flip it over. There we go. When you take a look at this, you're going to see three pictures there. And the three pictures that you will see are pictures of Bryant Park. This is the park in New York that is about 3 acres, which is practically identical in size to the 3 acres that we have surrounding the Central Library if you were to expand the whole thing to be a central park. How ironic that out of all the parks in the United States, you pick up the one park that precisely fits this particular area to a T in terms of its size, in terms of its scope and purpose. Now, that is what a good mitigating solution is. And you cannot tell me that there is no mitigating solution, and the EIR is completely wrong to say that we don't have a mitigating solution with regard to the Parks and Recreation. Now, the irony about this whole thing is that the following council members, Mr. Yusefian, Mr. Najarian, Mr. Quintero, and Mr. Weaver, on December, about 2 years ago, when you were running for office, you stated very clearly, when I show you that big picture in the rendering of what a downtown could look, and I ask you, do you favor a major expansion of our Central Park so that we could have a central urban park? All 4 of you lift up your card and said yes. And you tell me whether it is just simply a campaign rhetoric or whether it is an outright lie to me and to the public. And tell me right now. Because you have an opportunity to basically come forth and really create a true urban park. Because this 10% allocation, where you say 5% of the front setback of a tall building and 5% somewhere in the building, so long as it's public, mitigates this issue. It doesn't. It absolutely does not mitigate it. And the one place where you have it, you're basically going to ignore and put another building in there. This can be mitigated. This is about a campaign promise that you made. You made it to me. You saw that picture at every single one of the various different campaign meetings that we had. So it wasn't an accident. You saw it every single time you stopped and talked to me about it. This, if you cannot truly mitigate it, then you only have one choice. You got to go with the low-rise alternative. Because it's the only one. Because the greater the density of downtown, the greater the need for open park. And if you're not willing to address it, then the only alternative you have is the low-rise alternative. And if Proposition 90 does not pass, then you don't need to make this decision today. Thank you.
Mr. Quintero.
Not just on the campaign trail, but following the election, we had more than one opportunity to expand this park, and I was very interested in doing so. It was my opinion that we already own one building along Brand that's going to be knocked down and eventually will be turned into a paseo to connect the library and the Central Park. We should have bought another building. We should have built the senior housing there, or rather the senior center there on Brand. That would have been the ideal location for it. That would have given us more green space. I still think we should take by eminent domain, we should take the, whatever the hall is called there, along the Masonic Lodge, along with that corner, and green that corner and use the Masonic Lodge for public use. And we need a central park. I agree 100%. And as the votes have taken place, I've commented on it, and I'm still for it. So that's my feeling on a central park in that part of the downtown.
Okay, Mr. Najarian.
I am also for it. It wasn't just campaign rhetoric. We do need a central park. I was with Mr. Quintero when we were designing the Adult Recreation Center to put the buildings onto Brand to expand and make that park space as large as possible. And not only that, but to look at the corner, to look at the parking lot across the street at the church, and we also wanted to keep our eye on the property across the street, the current armory, where we could put an aquatic complex. It didn't work out that way. We make our decisions by a three-person majority. And I was clear, if you want to go back and look at the videos, That's just not the way it turned out. It was an opportunity that wasn't taken. I accept that. Doesn't mean that I have stopped looking for park space. Doesn't mean that I've stopped looking for an aquatic complex. Doesn't mean that I am happy and in any way feel that the development of this downtown specific plan, whatever version is passed, is going to actually give us usable park space as Mr. Hoffman describes it. But it's something that I personally am moving forward on. We talked about mitigating efforts, park impact fees, which I think we're going to deal with in a few weeks, that are going to give us the funds to purchase land to make not just open space, but parks, hopefully an aquatic center that I've been talking about for a while. But that's about it.
we were actually very
Mr.
close, or fairly close, on the including contacting Senator Feinstein, but we were very close on the National Guard, on the Armory. We own that property, and Mr. Starbird also worked on it, but unfortunately, with the money going to other Department of Defense, the idea there was to move them out of that place, of that location, and go for a location in Burbank near the airport. And that was on its way to fruition, but it didn't work out. But that would have been, and still could eventually someday be, the perfect complement to the park across the street, whether it's an aquatic center or a readaptive use of the building, but that's potential park space across the block. But there's plenty that we can do in that location to acquire more green space.
There's no more, Ms. Wilkerson.
I was just going to refer you to page 113, where items 6, 7, and 8 in your implementation program provide for additional work on these park issues. 6 says to develop a master plan for the Central Park block to coordinate private and public development. 7 is to develop master plans for the Perkins Plaza or Civic Center to maximize public usage of the public open space resource. And 8 is to establish a funding mechanism such as impact fees or downtown improvement district to build new open space within the DSP area and or within walking distance of the downtown specific plan area. And of course, we also have the incentive for open space with private development that is a very important option on some sites, the larger sites in particular. So the plan does acknowledge additional work is necessary.
Thank you. Okay, there's no more cards. Now, Mr. Howard, do I look first to see if, unless council members have more comments, look for a motion?
Comments.
Okay, Mr. Menuchio.
Go ahead, ask. I'd like to know how we need to proceed as well.
Should we take them individually, go to 3A first?
And Mr. Mayor, the hearing was never open. The hearing was closed last week. And we just took public comments this evening. Mr. Mayor, members of council, as I explained earlier this afternoon, A and D are linked. You need to take the findings and statement of overriding considerations first.
So we'll do 7A first.
Do 7A first.
Then move to B.
Move to B.
Then to C.
Then to D.
Then to D.
And as I pointed out, that if the ordinance adopted at D, assuming there is one adopted at D, is inconsistent with your action on
And you go
7A,
back.
we will have to go back and
Reconsider.
what you've done. A couple of things I want to add for the record, if I can. You received written documentation from Mr. Henning, who represents Conquest Student Housing, and Mr. Smolensky, and also Herbert Milano. He pointed out he was challenging in this most recent missive that he has submitted, challenging some of the findings in the statement of overriding considerations, and he made a couple of points that I think bear or need some response on the record. One was that the issue of this quote-unquote 10% variance has just popped out and has now been it just popped out last week and is now here in front of you. That is slightly inaccurate. That issue of 10% variance has been discussed by staff and has been out there in a number of drafts for some period of time, as I understand it. And in addition, as Mr. Garcia noted, it was covered in the EIR in terms of the cumulative impact section. Also, he noted that those projects may escape environmental review. I need to let you know that in talking with staff, it appears that those handful of projects either have EIRs that are underway or completed. And even if not, under a program EIR, it is somewhat of a tiered approach. That if this specific plan is adopted and the program EIR has already been certified, that all it means is that you will take a proposed project, look to determine how completely it was evaluated in that program EIR. Essentially, you use somewhat of a checklist. And if you determine that it has not been fully evaluated by the program EIR, you need to do an initial study. And you need to begin to look at whether you need to do some supplemental environmental work, whether it's a supplemental EIR, an addendum to the program EIR, or a mitigated negative declaration. So they do not escape environmental review, and I want to make that clear. Likewise, I think for the record, it's important to note that Mr. Henning represents a client, Conquest Student Housing, among other individuals, which has been opposing EIRs and challenging EIRs in a number of other projects. It appears to be an economic issue where there is any proposed development that is proposed by whether it's a Glendale developer or Los Angeles developer or elsewhere. Some information that we have received notes that EIRs are being challenged in different geographic areas where there is a threat of competition against Conquest housing. And that's an economic issue that was raised in the town center context, as you might recall, and it does have an impact on the issue of standing. So I wanted to make sure that that was on the record as well.
Thank you. Okay, and before Mr. Manuka speaks, if you're listening in, you haven't voted, you got 5 minutes left. Okay, Mr. Manuka. Well, do I hear a motion?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to again pitch my point of view on this whole downtown strategic plan, and I think it's an important issue that will determine the face of Glendale over the next probably 50 years, and the way we've approached the issue. I believe that the environmental impact report was not properly done, and the alternatives were not properly selected, and I will address that issue as much as I can, although we did address it quite a bit last week. And to me, it was apparent that the EIR was not properly prepared. And as we look at the draft plan, the plan that is being presented by staff or recommended by staff and the alternatives, the differences in these plans are minimal. I'd like to ask a question from the Director of Planning. The plan that is recommended by staff, and it says 6 stories in the Orange District, is that 6 stories above retail?
It's total 6 stories.
Total 6 stories. As I look at these plans and I continue to say that the differences are minimal, I want to bring to my colleagues' attention the one building on the corner of Brand and Broadway, the Community Bank building.
Mm-hmm.
It's retail with 6 stories above that. What we're doing with the draft plan, that is the one on the left that is being presented. The Orange District is 6 stories, 12 stories with incentives. Visualize that building probably 1 story less, and visualize another 6 stories above that, or 5 stories above the existing building down the Orange District. There are some projects that are currently on the way and have received the Stage 1 approval, and that's fine. However, when you look at the whole district and that whole area, and the difference between the plan recommended and the plan on the right, which is the mid-rise alternative. Is that the mid-rise? That's the low-rise alternative.
Yeah.
The mid-rise alternative is the 3 blocks.
A must be behind it.
Right, it's the one behind. 3 blocks of 6-story buildings, possible 12-story buildings, and I still am not convinced that incentives should give 100% increase in the number of stories. It shouldn't go from 6 to 12. We don't do that anywhere, but we're doing it for this plan for some reason. Maybe it should go from 6 to 2, 6 to 8, or 6 to 10, but I don't understand giving 6 additional stories for incentives, but that's what's being proposed here. If we look at the draft plan on the left and the one on the right, The only differences that are there are the 3 blocks. And let me remind you that the difference in population and the units between these 2 plans are 66 units, approximately 200 people in terms of population, which I think is incorrect. I think the draft plan will probably have more density than what was analyzed, and we will see that in the future. But the differences between the draft plan and the mid-rise alternative being 66 units, and in terms of zoning, the northern area, north of Milford being remaining what it is, 6 stories with 12 with incentives, and the rest of the 3 blocks similar to the transition areas on the west, having 4 stories and 2 additional stories for incentives. The difference between these 2 plans is minimal in terms of population, in terms of density. The only differences between these 2 plans is the heights of the buildings that are being allowed. And if you vote for the plan that is being recommended, you're only voting for the aesthetics of the building. That you're voting for the draft plan, for the initial plan, the plan that is recommended, only because you like 12-story buildings as opposed to 6-story buildings, because the differences are very minimal. Based on staff's calculations, there's only approximately 200 population increase from the mid-rise alternative to the alternative that is being presented. I would also like to go back to the low-rise alternative. The low-rise alternative has, in the northern part, still the 6 stories with 12-story incentives. However, the rest of the areas are 4 stories with 1 additional story as an incentive. So the differences between the low-rise and the mid-rise and the recommended plan is approximately 500 units, and in terms of population, approximately probably around 1,500 people. So the differences are very minimal, and you're only voting for the aesthetics. If you like, and your vision for the downtown for the future, and that mid-area that is, in my opinion, so crucial in terms of downtown Glendale, and that's what, in my opinion, makes downtown Glendale what it is in terms of the view corridors and in terms of the landscape of the city of Glendale with the mountains around it. If you allow 12 stories over there and 12 stories and high-rises in the south and the north, you have no view from the downtown. If you stand in the corner of Wilson and Brand, you will not see any mountains. All you'll see is buildings. And that's what you're voting for. You're not voting for additional population. You're not voting for additional dollars in terms of sales taxes. You're not voting for additional retail space. Very minimal differences. And I recommend, I prefer the low-rise alternative, although it's not low enough for me, I have to say, for the mid-Brand Boulevard, mid-downtown areas. And but I'm willing to compromise. I think the mid-rise alternatives I'm willing to support. I would also like to ask my colleagues to err on the side of caution. If you rezone the whole area with high-rises, you cannot downzone it again. The probability of you downzoning it is slim to none. And if you rezone it to the mid-rise alternative, you can always, if you feel that that's not doing the job, you can always rezone it, and you can always upzone it. Also, in terms of design guidelines, there have been many comments in terms of high-rises versus low-rises, saying that low-rises look like a box. But I have to remind you that the design guidelines for whatever you zone there is the same. It's irrelevant whether it's a high-rise or it's a low-rise. The design guidelines are the same. So you're basically voting at this point, by voting for the actual plan, you're voting for high-rises in the midsection, 6 to 12-story buildings in the midsection of the downtown. And I just don't see downtown Glendale in that way. I see the downtown different. I see the downtown with the gateway areas, that's fine, high-rises, the lower areas. We limited the town center to 67 feet because he wanted 500 units in terms of housing. We said you can't have 500 units. You can have 300 units, and you have to keep the height of the town center lower because that's what we expect. That's what we saw as downtown Glendale. Now we're going around rezoning all of the downtown Glendale from 6 to 12 stories. The 90% of the city will be 6 to 12 stories, and what we're going to have a little hole in the middle, and we're going to feel good about ourselves because the Alex District, we kept it what it is, and there's discussions of increasing the heights on that as well. We're going to have a little hole with the Alex Theater in it, and everything else around it is going to turn into high-rise buildings. That's not my vision of Glendale, and I ask my colleagues to support at a minimum, at a maximum, the mid-rise alternative.
Okay, if there's no further, Mr. Gutierrez.
Well, let me start by saying I would be more persuaded with that argument had you not voted for the intense use on 15 acres between Brand, Central, and Colorado. Because am I correct in assuming that they're anticipating 10,000 car trips or 12,000 vehicle trips? Does anybody have those numbers?
Some high numbers. Yeah.
Some high numbers, yeah. Those. So after that vote, whatever else is done in the downtown is going to pale in comparison to the type of traffic situation that's going to be created with that project. By all measures, when you talk about housing combined with retail at the ground level, it reflects less traffic, more opportunities for people to come down from the high rises and so forth. I think I've mentioned that in the past, no use beating it to death. In terms of the projects that we have currently that we can more or less count on in this economic cycle and this real estate cycle that we're in, the city attorney, Mr. Howard, mentioned a handful of projects. It's actually four. There are four possible projects at this point that have submitted their plans and hopefully will get built. So I don't think anytime soon there's going to be this huge traffic jam in the rest of the downtown. Brand itself, if something doesn't get done, all of the shopping, all of the activity, everything else is going to take place at the town center. So unless there's something in place that's going to be an incentive for people to come in and build and hopefully do something creative, we're going to have a central part of Brand Boulevard that I guess will wind up having to buy, condemn the property, and then give it away to a developer. So I'd prefer for private sector developers to come in with the right type of zoning and build some quality buildings and try to have a downtown where people are living there and so forth. So I think we're in good shape with this plan. And my personal belief is that we're going to have very little growth for the next real estate cycle. I think we're at the tail end of a boom, and I think it's going to be quite a while. I hope those four projects get built, but other than those, I don't know what's next. I think it's going to be quite a while. So I'm ready to introduce, or rather to make a motion for 7A1.
Is there a second, then we can discuss some more?
I'll second.
I'll make a couple comments. Don't see hands. I've lived in Glendale coming up 68 years. I think I'm qualified to say what Glendale was. I think I'm fairly qualified to say what I think Glendale needs to look like in the future. And I respectfully disagree with at least one of my colleagues on what that would be downtown.
Thank you for disagreeing and not making it a political issue. I appreciate that, unlike the other colleague here. He didn't say who he disagreed with yet. Well, he's disagreeing with me,
I did it.
apparently.
I did it respectfully too.
Thank you, and I appreciate that.
In
That's how it should be done.
In 1997, I still remember, and I think I've said this before, there was a project where Intercorp was going in. It was a housing project, and I voted against it, and I made the statement at that time, we needed to have a comprehensive development, a rezoning of downtown Glendale, not hodgepodge development. It's taken 10 years to get to this point. The heights and stuff, I don't have a problem with it downtown. We're the third largest city in LA County in population. Most cities of that magnitude do have a downtown. It's not like we're building all over the city. We're trying to manage it in a few blocks downtown. I was at a conference a week or so ago, and they talked about 30 million more people moving into California in the next 10 to 20 years. It's quite evident that the state legislature will dictate more housing requirements on virtually every city. We've already been through that with Sacramento one time already. I have pushed for trying to manage the housing downtown where we can help mitigate the impacts and try to make downtown a vibrant area for future residents to live, while at the same time hoping that my colleagues, if I'm still here after April, will join with me in trying to downzone multifamily areas in the residential areas that are single-family still, because I see that as the biggest problem coming up. Every single family house that's out there in Glendale now that is zoned in, is in a multifamily zone, is eventually going to be torn down and more housing going in. And I'd like to see that controlled. You can't cut the traffic down, but you can stabilize it and not let it get worse if we do it. Downtown, we'll handle it much better. It's very well known that that housing, as opposed to commercial, results in much less traffic. People are staggered in the times they come and go. Where commercial, as you know, if you drive any freeway in the morning, there's the rush hours. And the way zoning is now, we could have 50-story office towers all up and down there. No, there would be no traffic moving at all on there, on the streets. So I'm for trying to do it downtown, rather than allow it to creep out into the residential areas and make matters even worse for all of us. You could draw up a whole number of scenarios. I've looked at enough environmental documents to know that ranges of alternatives can be minor and they can be major. There's just so far you can go in developing a reasonable range of alternatives. And I think we have done that, but that is, of course, a subjective opinion on whether the range of alternatives is adequate. And I suppose if somebody wants to challenge us on that environmental document, they can go to court and challenge us. But as far as I can tell, this is about the most complete environmental document I've ever seen done. And there is no document that is absolutely 100% perfect. That document doesn't exist. A lot of people have put an awful lot of time into this, particularly in the last 4 years. An awful lot. A lot of study sessions, a lot of discussion. And here we are the last day at the final vote at 8:15 in the evening. And I hope, for God's sake, that all that effort and all that time put into this sees us going ahead with the recommended plan from the staff. Because I truly think it's the best thing for my city I'm going to live in the rest of my life. Now, if there's no other comments, okay, there's two, Mr. Najarian and then Mr.
I think
Yusefian.
each one of us on council sitting up here have a duty to make some comments so people know where we
Be my
stand.
guest. Do your duty.
Thank you. First off, I want to thank Hassan and Alan, who put many, many months of hard work on this project, overcoming many challenges, both within the city and from without the city in terms of putting together the vision that we call our downtown specific plan. Included in that are the advisory group that worked many months in helping you, as well as the other members of the other departments, such as John O. and Steve and Phil and everyone else that had a play in this. You did, regardless of where we go with this, you did an excellent job, and hasn't been easy. We gave you a hard time, too, several times. You probably had a few heart attacks in the last 48 hours. I want to thank Elaine for perhaps, they say one of the best thing that a manager and a department head can do is get out of the way when you've got some creative geniuses working, and let them run with the ball and see where it takes you. The same goes for Jim Starbird, who did a lot of corralling and kept this whole plan afloat. This whole Prop 90 issue, whether it passes or doesn't pass, really did catch us off guard. 4 or 5 months ago, we never even heard of the Anderson Initiative, never dreamt that it would come, and that in any way a city's ability to regulate its land use would be in any way curtailed. But the initiative came true. It's on the ballots. They're counting the ballots right now. So thank you to everyone that did all the hard work, as well as my colleagues for going through this and sitting through many study sessions and hashing it out on the dais. Glendale is a great city. I don't think there's anyone who would disagree with that. Are we a perfect city? No, we're not. We certainly could use more park space. We certainly could use more free-flowing transportation. We certainly could use cleaner air and less noise in certain areas. But compared to what's out there, Glendale is a great city. I'm proud to be up here dealing with this decision, which I think is one of the most important decisions that council is going to make in the next 10 years. This is going to lay the groundwork, lay the footprint for the future development of Glendale when we're long gone. And that, I think that really imposes on us a sense of duty, and perhaps that's some of the enjoyment you planners get from your work, because you know that whatever you do and the way you design things, it's going to be your legacy. It's going to be here long after you move on into the next world. So I'm very excited. I've been excited through this whole project. The specific plan has many great things going for it. One of the things that it does is it's encouraging excellence in design. In every step of the way, we're always talking about innovative designs, whether it's open space, courtyard space, paseos, exteriors, facades, height, colors, efficiency in our use of resources. So we're encouraging that. We're on a great step in that regard. We're focusing on growing in the one part of our city that we should be growing in, and that's downtown. It's the area where we have resources. We have restaurants. We have shops. We have a great Americana project coming in. The Galleria is going to be upgrading. And just wait and see about all the other great things that are going to be following us into the downtown area. It's going to be a place where you can walk. You can live, you can work, and you can walk down the street to get what you need. You're not going to have to get in your car and drive around from northwest Glendale down to get a nice Italian dinner. You can actually live in the downtown area and have all your amenities right there. And as that happens, it is going to create a sense of community. It's going to create a sense of vibrancy and energy. And this is what we've all been talking about, and this is what this specific plan is going to create. We're going to be moving away from the high-rise office buildings, which, through our experience, we've learned doesn't create the best sort of ambiance. It's folks coming in at 9 o'clock. It's folks leaving town at 5. In the evenings, it's a ghost town. Between the rush hours in the morning and in the evening, it's a madhouse. We're going to be creating and inviting a wide range of businesses and service vendors to come into the city. Almost all of these projects, all of the potential uses include a mixed use. We want some sort of retail component, some sort of restaurant component on the ground floors, have residences above it, so we don't have to drive miles and miles to get to where we want to go. At the same time, we're trying to preserve some of the character of downtown. And in the downtown, when you talk about character, what we really have is the mid-brand area, from Broadway on up past the Alex. We're thinking about adjusting that to encourage some development there, but that is really the focus of maintaining our heritage, especially around the Alex Theater. And whether a park gets in there or whether we maintain the facades as an old town type of place that may be more than 1 or 2 stories, we're also permitted to do that in our specific plan. It's my hope that with the development of housing downtown, it's going to relieve the pressure of building in the hillsides, of building the infill lots, because the mere fact of increasing the number of housing downtown is going to be a very attractive place to live. Folks such as my parents, Mary Najarian, has said, well, do you think I should get a place downtown, get a condo? That way I won't have to drive down to see the kids. That way I won't have to get in my car to go to the dry cleaners or go to a restaurant. She wants to live downtown. She's going to sell her house. That'll open it up for someone else to come and live there and obviate the need for further developments in our hillsides, which council has tried very hard to protect. But as hard as we protect, landowners do have rights. This is hopefully going to take some of that pressure away from building in the hillsides and put it in the downtown core where development should be. Is traffic going to be a problem? Well, it might be a problem, but we are focused on it like nothing else. Jono and Steve, with the encouragement from Mr. Yusefian and Mr. Starbird, have raised this issue to the very foremost of our minds. We're going to tackle the traffic problem, whether it's through transit usage, whether it's through a special trolley or other type of transportation up and down Brand. We are not going to let this city turn into a gridlocked nightmare. There's no way that's going to happen. We're going to have the best of both worlds. We're going to have a beautiful, striking downtown, and people are going to be able to move around. If you listen to our mobility consultant, Bonnie Nelson, that's exactly what she says is going to happen, that we're not going to have those nightmare conditions that some people think might have. Now, the real issue, now coming down to it, is, as Mr. Manukian said, who I value his input extremely, is the height. The difference between the mid-rise and the high-rise in terms of number of housing units is not that great. It's really just the height. It's really just the aesthetics. For me, I'm not a planner, I'm not an architect, but what I've learned and what I'm told is that if you permit the architect the ability, the option to go higher, he can do so much more with the building in creating a beautiful structure, design, materials, facade, etc. We've seen some of the beautiful designs that come out. Whether they're built or not, we don't know. We've seen the Amiti project, we've seen Intercore, we've seen the Verdugo Gardens. Each one of them striking designs when the architect is given a little bit of larger envelope to let his creativity run free. They're just beautiful, striking buildings that are going to be landmarks for Glendale. As people drive up and down the 134 freeway, we thought the Unum Provident building was a great deal. Yeah, that's a big building, and it's tall, and you can see it, but there's not much architectural style to it. All these other buildings are going to be stylish, they're going to be colorful, they're going to be unique, and it's, in my heart of hearts, I know that this is going to be a great thing for Glendale. Glendale, in many years to come, and maybe, as Mr. Quintero said, it might not happen in the next business cycle, in the real estate cycle, but at some point down the road, we are giving the creative minds and the developers and the residents of Glendale an option, the opportunity to build and to become one of the premier cities of California. I strongly feel that, and I will be supporting the option recommended by staff.
You have nothing to say?
No, I do.
Oh, okay.
I do, actually. It won't be as long, but I do, so this time.
That's a
The attorney got.
Well, actually, I think Mr. Najarian said most of the stuff that I was going to say to an extent, so there's no reason for me to repeat it. There's a couple of things that I want to say. Number one, I think there was a speaker who spoke and basically said, I read everything, but then I go like that and vote. And I wish to God I just did that, because it's so much easier to do that. You don't have to read voluminous volumes of documents, and I hate reading. That's one thing. I build a house. I'd rather build a house from scratch than read. But I do read everything because I think it's important for me to understand the concepts. And I don't vote like this either. I vote for things that I think it's right for the city, and I vote against things that I don't think it's right for the city. That's why I'm going to vote against 7A, which is overriding consideration on the EIR. I do agree with my colleague, Mr. Manukian. I have read enough EIRs in my life when I was a councilman, when I was on BZA, when I was on homeowner associations since 1989. And I will tell you, this one had some issues. And I do agree with some of the speakers. There are things that could be mitigated. Yes, you're short of park, you can mitigate it by building a park. Should be saying that. Didn't say that. There are certain things that you could do. That's why, and some of the things were not analyzed. I don't agree with the staff on this, and I have the right to do that. And so I'm not agreeing with the staff on this. But I am relying partly on the EIR, but I am relying mostly on my experience and knowledge that I have gained sitting on this dais on BZA and all the times I spent with the specific plans and all the strategic plans in this city. I know that there is a mitigation measure that should be there for parking, or there should be there for police. They should have put down, if you're adding 10,000, what our standard is. FBI says 1.4, we have 1.1. So based on our own standards, that's 22 police officers, or 11 police officers. If you have 10,000 people, 11 police officers. So I know in my mind what I need to do, even though it's not spelled out. Now, if I hadn't done all my homeworks over the years, I didn't remember all those facts over the years, then I would have a difficult time voting for any plan because I wouldn't have had the information. But I did have the information from the past, so I rely on those information. And I'll rely on those information to vote for 7B, C, and D. I do agree with Mr. Manukian when he says that there isn't much of a difference. And he's right when it comes to the number of population or what some of the impacts will be. There isn't. It's very little. But there is a huge difference in aesthetics. And actually, I think if you do have tall buildings, they have tendency to be narrower, which creates vistas that you could see the hills. If you build the bulky 6-story buildings, it's very difficult to see buildings because you will go from setback to setback and you just won't see through them. And that's the one thing that I'm having an issue with. The speaker says, is that 5% or 10% is considered to be mitigation measure for your parks? Not in my book. That doesn't make that. That 4 or 5% open space is an open space that is going to improve the quality of the design on that particular site for that particular building. That's all. It does not deal with the lack or shortage of park space for me. And to the rest, I acquiesced to Mr. Najarian saying what this plan will do. I think this plan is going to make the city a very vibrant city. And it is very, very much consistent with our RTP that we did with the SCAG, Southern California Association of Government, which throughout the state of California, not just us, also the northern part, equal sisters to the Skag, say the same thing. Time has come for us to stop spreading to all the suburbs and go back to our urban core and use the infrastructure that we have, because we can no longer afford to build more infrastructure and take more open space land. So we got to make the best of what we have. That's what this plan does, and there are many, many plans such as this that are being passed throughout the state of California. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
And I would like to put you on the spot again, Hassan, for 1 minute. We were talking, and if this actions occur tonight positively, where are you and staff heading off to in the next few weeks? Where are you going to be going?
Hawaii.
Oh, they wish.
In terms of the follow-up,
With this plan, what are you going to be doing with the plan if we approve it here tonight?
we
Where are
will
you
start implementing it.
No. Outside the city, speaking engagements.
Oh, yeah, thank you for asking that. We have actually already been invited to start to speak in conferences. We've spoken in one conference about the plan, the American Planning Association conference, California conference. We did that last week, and it was very well received. We will be speaking at the American Institute of Architects next week on the 15th in the evening, and we are already having conversations about presenting at the national conferences for 2007.
And to your knowledge, how many other cities have done what we have done in adopting a downtown-specific plan? Do you know of many?
Other cities have adopted specific plans, form-based plans similar to this. However, what we're doing is unique and actually a pioneer in terms of the level of clarity that it gives in very specific and predictable sets of expectations in a specific plan, as opposed to other specific plans that tend to be a little bit lectury, and they try to get you through concepts without getting very specific and predictable.
So we may be a model for other cities to follow in the future.
We're being told by the people in the field that they already want us to go to their areas and speak so they can emulate.
Thank you.
Do you need any councilmen to come with them?
Well, I was going to come with you, actually.
We would be happy to inform you of all of those events, and we would be happy to see you at those events.
Be happy to go and
Sabotage everything.
give the other side of the story.
Thank you.
May I make an additional comment, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
I would be remiss if I did not join my colleague, Mr. Najarian, in commending the staff. I disagree with your conclusions, with your recommendations, with some of the assumptions and all of that, but I do respect the work that you've done over the past few years in terms of this specific plan. I want to commend the director, Elaine, Hassan, and everyone that's involved, as well as Mr. Starber and all the staff. It's not an easy thing to come up with, but regardless of what my feelings are in terms of the plan, I believe that you've moved forward with a lot of integrity and a lot of goodwill in terms of the city of Glendale, and you've come up with a plan that I hope I will not have to say I told you so. So, thank you.
Mr. Quintero.
Yeah, I also want to congratulate and commend the staff, and starting with Elaine Wilkerson, and obviously the years in Toronto and in Portland, Mr. Hassani, the years in West Hollywood. I think they've given us a plan that's going to work in this urban core, and I think we're going to have a great downtown as a result. So thank you both.
So who's Mr. Hassani?
Hagami. Excuse me.
Mr. Starbird.
Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to point out, a comment was made that the plan was rushed along because of Prop 90. The time frame and schedule for Prop 90 was published long before Prop 90, or frankly, there were two other initiatives by Senator McClintock that were attempting to qualify as well before they were even on the radar screen. And our commitment was to builders and to you and the community that this would move along and not get mired down, because it was so critical, especially to the proposed developers and to the downtown. So that schedule and time frame, which Elaine and staff has worked very hard to adhere to because of the commitments, was made and published long before the Anderson initiative was even on the radar screen.
May I conclude by saying, Elaine, this is a great way of going out the door if this does pass here. You'll remember it the rest of your life.
However, we have yet to be able to see if it's going to pass.
Yes, I said if.
The motion is second.
Can we
Can I make an argument against it?
No. Let's take a vote on 3A1. There was a motion as second.
7A1.
7A1. There was a motion as second on it. Roll call.
Council members Menuchyan,
No.
Najarian,
Yes.
Quintero,
Yes.
Yusefian,
No.
Mayor Weaver.
Aye.
Fails?
Passes. Needs 3.
I'll move 7B.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion? Roll call.
Council members Menuchyan,
No.
Najarian,
Yes.
Quintero,
Yes.
Yusefian,
Aye.
Mayor Weaver.
Aye.
I'll move
7C
second.
and 7D.
Do
Do
them
them
separate.
separately. 7D. 7C.
Second.
Okay, roll call.
You're moving 7D.
7C.
Okay.
Going in order.
7C as amended.
And Councilmember Quintero,
Okay.
second.
Second.
Council members Menuchyan,
No.
Najarian,
Yes.
Quintero,
Yes.
Yusefian,
Aye.
Mayor Weaver.
Aye.
I'll move 7D1.
Second as amended
As
today.
amended.
Okay, roll call, please.
Council members Menuchyan,
No.
Najarian,
Yes.
Quintero,
Yes.
Yusefian,
Aye.
Mayor Weaver.
Aye, and at 8:35, 4-year odyssey is done. Is that the city manager applauding?
I'm recalling back to the work that you did and staff did on East Broadway, which was the first baby step, as we called it, toward eventually developing housing standards for the downtown, and that's been, we started community meetings probably 5 years ago.
Only,
It actually
5, 6
started
years
before
ago,
I
we were
came.
holding community
only
meetings.
time will tell if Mr. Menuchyan is right or wrong.
I hope I'm wrong.
And I hope you are too.
Yeah, I mean, you want the best for the city.
Oh, yeah. We all do. Okay, thank you, everyone. What an effort. I can't thank you enough for the effort. Whether you agree with it or not, you really did a hell of a job. Heck of a job.
We got one more.
However, one more
Yes, now we're
critically
gonna move
important
on.
item remains.
Yeah, now we're going to bring on to 8. Mr. Kasakian?
8A is an action item. It's city attorney regarding provide authorization to allow city manager to execute indemnity agreements when the agreement does not exceed $50,000 or the agreement allows the city to use the property owned by another. At 8A1 is ordinance for introduction.
Mr. Yusefian?
I'd like to introduce the ordinance on 8A1.
And now we'll have the guest speaker, Barry Allen, 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council, staff, and the public. I just have a question with that. On looking at the fact that the city is going to be indemnifying as required certain people whose properties we're going to be using, or is that going to be indemnifying contractors who don't have insurance and working out? Now, if a contractor doesn't have insurance, I think in most cases, if I read that, insurance policies for CGL are pretty cheap. You can get $1 million for $1,000, and so I just don't understand this particular ordinance. Maybe we can have a little more elucidation on it. And I do know that I understand that the city is going to is looking into virtually becoming an insurance broker to cover the insured interest of environmental issues for the towing contractors and their storage yards. So I don't know if this is a part of that or not. I think that we do need more than what is said in the staff report. So the question is, who are we indemnifying? If we're taking city equipment on somebody else's property, I would imagine the city's insurance should cover it. And if it's a contractor going on somebody else's property to do work, perform work for the city, I would imagine their insurance should cover it. Thank you. I'm Barry Ammon.
Mr. Howard?
So, Mr. Mayor, members of council, I'll let Mr. Braden, certainly it's a fairly straightforward explanation. Mr. Braden prepared the ordinance in consultation with myself. It's been something that, in my view, is a long time in coming. Mr. Braden will explain the circumstances. The ordinance, as you can see, is very narrowly drafted. to really strike at two particular areas. So I'll let Mr. Braden explain.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of council, the answer is that this is to indemnify property owners where the city of Glendale is using their property.
Your time is up, I think.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your consideration.
That's a good partial answer.
That's the answer.
Normally, this is done when our police officers or fire department personnel are conducting some kind of training for the betterment and education of their staff, and some property owner will basically, in most situations, donate their property to the city of Glendale at no cost, so that we can carry forth that training. And in exchange for that, they usually want some kind of an indemnification clause to protect themselves in the event that somebody's injured. And as we know, these have come before council routinely in the past, and this will avoid the necessity of bringing those forth.
Thank you.
As I recall, we also have school district use facilities.
His report, the Community College District, we already do
Right.
that by resolution. We're going to do that now by ordinance. And also another good example is the Winter Wonderland.
Right.
Every year we have an ice company that delivers tons of ice to Brand for the Winter Wonderland, so kids can slide down on the little discs and they can slide down little ice hills and play in the snow, the simulated snow. The ice companies always want indemnification in case somebody gets hurt on the ice. They get sued. All they're doing is putting the ice down on our property. It's those kinds of situations where routinely we come to the city council every year just to get approval of a budgeted item which is well within, it's already budgeted, it's under $50,000, and yet they're seeking indemnification so they don't get sued for somebody slipping and falling on city property.
Mr. Najarian.
Let me clarify, Mr. Braden. So I have a colleague of mine who had a piece of property, a duplex that he was going to sell. The police came to him and said, "Can we use this for SWAT training?" He says, "Sure, go ahead." So in the course of, for free, in the course of doing their training, let's say one of the officers were to fall through a floorboard and become injured, this would give the city manager, prior to that occurring, of course, it would give the city manager the authority to execute the indemnification, to indemnify that homeowner, that property owner, for any injuries to either employees or to others. Let's say a bullet went off by mistake and whatever, let's not go there, but some other person were to be injured, as long as the initial agreement between the property owner and the city is less than $50,000 for usage, city manager has the authority to execute the indemnity.
You're correct with one exception. It wouldn't be any limit because, as you said, he's allowing us to use the property at no cost. And therefore, there's two provisions of the ordinance. Number one is where we're using the property of another, and the second provision, or the second prong, is where there's a contract. Mr. Howard mentioned the Winter Wonderland, which is usually under $10,000, usually $5,000, where we pay them $5,000. They bring in the ice, and citizens of the city of Glendale have fun at Brand Park, sliding down. The children have fun doing that. Well, the benefit to the contractor is so small and the risk potentially is so great that the city wants to do that as a benefit to the public, and therefore they'll enter into that contract. So to make it short, the first one covers where we're using somebody else's property. The second one covers in those kind of contracts where the value is under $50,000.
Okay, that sounds... The Winter Wonderland sounds a little dangerous with the slipping and the falling and the ice balls that could go flying and
Are you making a
take out an
motion
eye.
to
but-
eliminate that?
Actually,
I mean, that's a little...
Statistically, we can tell you we have had
scary.
one claim in all the years that I've been here with Winter Wonderland. One claim.
And that was me.
It's well supervised, but for that reason, the ice company wants the indemnification.
Right.
But it's a well supervised event. We haven't had those kinds of issues.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
And those are things in the past that have come to City Council, Winter Wonderland specifically, and City Council has routinely approved those.
Consent calendar item.
Okay. That do it? Okay, what is?
I'll move
it's
8A.
been- No.
There's
Introduction's
already
been
been introduced.
What's next, please?
Are there any? Is there any new business?
Seeing none,
Move to adjourn.
we stand adjourned 8:45.